6. In a letter to Alcott one, who is so immeasurably higher than all his detractors, have led Mr. Hume into an imprudent confession. When caught and cornered he resorts to a downright, barefaced lie. I am going, after this preliminary entree and matador and necessary explanation, to make you acquainted with certain extracts from private letters not intended for your eye, nevertheless, far from confidential, since in nearly every one of them Mr. H. begs the addressee to have them read by other theosophists. I hope this will not be imputed to me as a mark of ungentlemanly instincts by you. As to every other man, since, nowadays, a man universally recognized as a gentleman is often a low wretch, and gentlemanly externals often hide the soul of a villain, he is welcome to regard me in any light he pleases. These extracts I give you because it becomes absolutely necessary that you should be correctly informed of the true nature of him, who now passes his time in writing letters to the London theosophists and candidates for membership with the determined object of setting every mystic in the West against a brotherhood of atheists, hypocrites, and sorcerers. It will help to guide your actions in the event of possible contingencies, and mischief caused by your friend and our well-wisher, who, while denouncing my brother, my more than friend, as a pilferer, coward, liar, and the incarnation of baseness, insults me with words of pitying praise which he thinks I am traitor enough to accept and imbecile enough not to weigh at their value. Remember, such a friend is to be guarded against as one takes precautions against a duellist who wears a corselet beneath his shirt. His good actions are many, vices far more numerous. The former have always been largely controlled and promoted by his inordinate self-love and combativeness, and if it is not yet determined which will finally control the impetus whose outcome will be his next birth, we may prophesy with a degree of perfect assurance, that he will never become an adept either in this or his future life. His spiritual aspirations received a full chance to develop. He was tested, as all have to be, as the poor moth was, who was scorched in the candle of Rothney Castle and its associations, but the victor in the struggle for adeptship was ever self and self alone. His cerebral visions have always painted for him the image of a new regenerator of mankind in place of the brothers whose ignorance and black magical dealings he has found out. That new avatar does not live at Almira but on Jocko. And so the demon vanity which has ruined Dayanand is ruining our quondam friend and preparing him to make an assault upon us and the T.S. far more savage than the Swamis. The future, however, may take care of itself. I shall only have to trouble you now with the data above indicated. You will now realize, perchance, why I was made to collect evidence of his untruthful, cunning nature in October last. Nothing, my friend, even apparently absurd and reprehensible actions, is done by us without a purpose. On the 1st of December, Mr. H. writing to Colonel O. said of us, as for the brothers, I have a sincere affection for K.H. and always shall have, and as for the others have no doubt that they are very good men, and acting according to their lights. But as to their system, I am, of course, entirely opposed. But that has nothing to do with the exoteric practical aims of the T.S. in which and in their furtherance I can as cordially and cheerfully cooperate with your good brothers as etc. etc. 8 days earlier, 22nd November, he had written to P. Srinivas Rao, Judge SCC. At Madras, I find the brotherhood a set of wicked selfish men, caring as a body for nothing but their own spiritual development. Mind, in this respect K.H. is an exception, but he is, I believe, the only one, and their system one of deception and tainted largely with sorcery. In that they employ spooks, i.e. elementals, to perform their phenomena. As to deception, once a man has become a Kila and bound himself by the vows they exact, you cannot believe a word he says. He will lie systematically. As for sorcery, the fact is that until the time of Sankappa, they were a set of unmitigated, vile sorcerers. Every Kila is a slave of the most abject description, a sham in thought, as well as in word and deed. Our society is an edifice noble in outside show, but built not on the rock of ages, but on the shifting sands of atheism, a whited sepulchre all bright inside, full of deceit and the dead bones of a pernicious Jesuitical system. You are at liberty to make what use you please of this letter inside the society, etc. On the 9th of the same month he wrote to Mr. Alcott of the manifest selfishness of the Brotherhood, intent solely on their spiritual development. On the 8th of September in a letter to 12 Chelas, the very ones he as referring to in the letter to Judge Srinivasrao of November 22 after having received from them an exasperatingly candid joint reply to the aforesaid diplomatic letter as liars and bound slaves, he said, as you know, he should not have expected any European to read between the lines of his plot in the HX letter in the Theosophist, but a set of Brahmins, the subtlest minds in the world, not ordinary Brahmins, but men of the highest, noblest training, etc. They may rest assured that he, shall never say or do anything that is not for the advantage of the brothers, the society, and all its objects. Thus it seems the charges of sorcery and dishonesty is to the advantage of Asiatic adepts. In this same letter, if you remember, he adds that it is the most efficient 6-carat epen for the conversion of the infidels at home yet forged, and that he of course expected, by writing this letter in the Theosophist, to take our dear old lady in / could not take her into the plot / etc. etc. With all his cunning and diplomacy he really seems to suffer from a loss of memory. Not only had he taken the dear old lady into the plot in a long private letter written to her a few hours after the said efficient weapon had been sent for publication, a letter sent by her to you and which you lost in your packing up at Simla to come down, but he had actually gone out of his way to put a few words of explanation on the back of the said letter / it is preserved as every other MSS. By Damodar, and the note runs thus: please print this carefully and without alteration. It answers admirably Davidson's and other letters from home. Extracts from these letters were enclosed in his manuscript. We can't long, I fear, bolster up but hints like these will help to break the fall, etc. Having thus himself forged the most efficient weapon for the conversion of the infidels at home, as to our actual existence, and unable henceforth to deny it, what better antidote than to add to the hints therein contained full and well-defined charges of sorcery, etc. When accused by the 12 Chelas in their joint answer to his letter to them, of a deliberate falsification of facts with reference to the dear old lady whom he had, notwithstanding all he could say to the contrary, taken into the plot, he writes in a letter to Subbaro that he had never done so. That his letter to the madam explaining to her the whys and reasons for that letter of his by HX carat was written and sent to her long after the said denunciatory letter was already in print / to this Subbaro, in his letter to whom he had bitterly abused and vilified answered by quoting to him the very words he had written on the back of the manuscript, thus showing to him how useless was any further falsehood. And now you may judge of his love for Subbaro. And now comes the bouquet. Writing on the ist of December to Mr. Alcott, letter first above referred to, he distinctly claims adept powers. I am very sorry I cannot join you in the body in Bombay, but if allowed I may nevertheless perhaps assist you there, yet in Fern's case he says it is a perfect chaos. And no one can tell what is really owing and what is not, and 23. Several letters upon the same topic teem with acknowledgement that he had no power to see what was owing on * during the past 6 months. Quite the contrary, it would seem, since in a letter to me within this period he describes himself as * not on a level spiritually with him, Fern, Sinnett and others. He did not dare brag to me of his spiritual clairvoyancy, but now, having broken forever with the Tibetan sorcerers, his potential adept powers have suddenly developed into monstrous proportions. They must have been from birth marvelously great since, he informs Alcott, same letter, that asterisk a certain amount of pranayam for a few months, 6 weeks in all, was necessary to ensure concentration at first. Have passed that stage and I am a yogi. The charge preferred now against him is of so grave a character that I would have never asked you to believe it on my simple assertion. Hence this long letter, and the following evidence which, please read with the utmost care and drawing your conclusions solely on that evidence. In his July letter to me he imputes to us the blame for Fern's course of falsehood, his pretended visions and pretended inspirations from us, and in the letter to Mr. Alcott, Decemberist, he charges Moria, my beloved brother, with acting in a most dishonorable manner, adding that he has never since looked upon him as a gentleman, for having caused Damodar to send Fern a transcript of my confidential report on him. This he regards as a dishonorable breach of confidence so gross that Mortar was afraid to let even K.H. know how he had stolen and made a bad use of my letter to him. K.H. is a gentleman I believe and would scorn so base an act. No doubt, I would had it been done without my knowledge and were it not absolutely necessary in view of clearly foreseen events to bring Mr. Hume to betray himself and thus counteract the influence and authority of his vindictive nature. The letter so transcribed was not marked confidential, and the words I am ready to say so to Fern's face, at any day are there. However, the unmeasured abuse and his truly saintly and gentlemanly indignation at Ms. treachery are followed by these words of confession, very startling as you will see. Fern does not, let me do him that justice, know to this day that I knew of this, i.e. of the letter pilfered by M. and sent to Fern through Damodar. In short, then Mr. Hume had means of reading the contents of a private letter addressed to Fern, registered, sent to his, Mr. Hume's, care, kept in a drawer of a table belonging to the house. The proof is complete since it is himself who furnishes it. How one Fern was at Bombay and he dreaded the just denial of even a rascal. Then, of course, either by reading its physical substance with his natural eyes, or, its astral essence by transcendental power. If the latter, then by what brief forcing system was the psychic power of this yogi, who, in July last, was not on a level spiritually with yourself, or even with Fern, suddenly shot out into such full flower and fruitage, whereas it takes even us, trained sorcerers 10 or 15 years to acquire it. Besides, if, this and other letters to Fern, were presented to him in the astral light, as he maintains in his letter in reply to Colonel O.'s query, herein enclosed, how comes it that the benevolent Almara genius, through whose help he suddenly acquired such tremendous PK wares, could cause him to take note of the contents, to read word for word and to remember only such letters as were kept by Fern in accordance with M's positive orders in his desk in Mr. Hume's house? While, we defy him to repeat one word of other and, for him, far more important letters sent by my brother to the probationary Keela, in which the latter was forbidden to keep them at Rothney Castle, but had them securely shut up in a locked desk at his own house. These queries, arising at Ms. will in Alcott's mind, he flatly put the question to Mr. Hume. As Ms. Keela, revering him, of course, as a father as well as teacher, he very properly put to the censor elegantiarum the direct question whether he had been himself guilty of the very dishonorable breach of gentlemanlike conduct of which he was complaining in Moria's case. And unjustly, as you now see, for what he did had my approval, since it was a necessary part of a preconceived plan to bring out, besides Mr. H's true nature, of a disgraceful situation, itself developed by the wicked API edits, follies and karma of sundry weak men, ultimate good, as you will find. We have no gentleman now, at all events, that would come up to the Simla standard. In Tibet, though many honest and truthful men. To Mr. Alcott's question came a reply so reeking with deliberate, bare falsehood, foolish vanity, and so miserable an attempt to explain away the only possible theory, that without the owner's knowledge he had read his private correspondence, that I have asked Moria to procure it for me for Yoi to read. After doing this you will kindly return it to me through Darbajari Nath, who will be at Madras within this week. I have done an unpleasant and distasteful task, but a great point will be achieved if it helps you to know us better. Whether your European standards of right and wrong inclines the scales in your opinion either one way or the other. Perchance, you may find yourself in C.C.Ms attitude, deploring to find yourself obliged to either accept or reject forever such a distressing moral paradox as myself. No one would regret it more deeply than I, but our rules have proved wise and beneficent to the world in the long run, and the world in general and its individual units especially are so terribly wicked that one has to fight each one with his or her own weapons. As the situation stands at present, and though we would not allow too much procrastination, it does seem desirable that you should go for a few months home, say till June. But unless you go to London and with C.C.Ms help explain the true situation and establish the Society of Self, Mr. Hume's letters will have done too much harm to undo the mischief. Thus your temporary absence will have achieved a dual good: perp the foundation of a true theosophical occult society, and the salvation of a few promising individuals for future careers, now jeopardized. Besides, your absence from India will not be an unmixed evil, since the friends of the country will feel your loss, and perhaps be all the more ready for your recall, especially if the Pioneer changes its tone. Some of your holiday time it might be agreeable to you to utilize in one form or another of theosophical writing. You have now a large store of materials, and if you would contrive to get copies of the didactic papers given to Mr. Hume, it would be a timely precaution. He is a prolific letter writer, and now that he has disburdened himself of all restraints he will bear close watching. Remember the Kohens prophesy. Yours ever sincerely, K. H. Letter No. LVHI received March, 1883. My dear Diamond Suit Ward, we will not, if you please, deal at present with the situation concerning stars and obscurations for reasons very plainly told to you this morning by HPB. My task becomes with every letter more dangerous. It becomes exceedingly difficult to teach you and hold at the same time strictly to the original program, so far shall we go and no further. Yet hold to it we must and I will. You have entirely mistaken my meaning in the telegram. The words, more et are related to the true explanation of your vision, not by any means, to a promise of some further psychological experiments made in that direction by myself. The vision was due to an attempt by D.K., who is extremely interested in your progress. While he succeeded in getting you out of your body, he failed entirely in his effort to open your inner vision. For reasons correctly surmised at the time by yourself. I took no personal active part in the attempt. Hence my answer surmises correct more et are. I am in a very false position just now, and have, in order not to jeopardize the possibilities of the future, to be doubly cautious. The probable date of your departure? Well, on or about April 7th. If your impatience disagrees with this desire of mine, you are free to do as you like. Yet, I would look upon it as a personal favor. I am profoundly disgusted with the apathy of my countrymen in general. More than ever I trust but in the few staunch workers of the luckless and hapless T.S. The Viceroy's letter would be of the greatest help if it could be but judiciously used. But in such matters, I see I am no judge, as I now augur from the impression left on your mind by R. Srinivasa Rao and others. The incident of February the 7th being explained, your question relating to earlier restrictions is already covered. May I beg of you two more personal and important favors? First, to ever bear in mind that whenever and whatever is possible will be always done for you unurged, hence never to either ask for, or suggest it, yourself, since it will amount to simply avoiding to me the supremely disagreeable task of having to refuse a friend's request without, moreover, being in a position to explain the reason why, and second, to remember that though personally and for your own sake I may be prepared To do a great deal I have in no way bound myself to do anything of the sort for the fellows of the British TS. I have pledged my word to you to teach them through your kind agency our philosophy and whether they accept it or not. But I have never undertaken to convince any of them of the extent of our powers nor even of our personal existence. Their belief or disbelief in the latter is a matter of very trifling importance to us indeed. If they are ever to be benefited by our promise, it must be through you, alone and your own personal efforts. Nor can you ever see me, in flesh, not even in a clearly defined vision unless you are prepared to pledge your honor never to reveal the fact to anyone, so long as you live, save you receive permission to that effect. That the consequence of such a pledge will be a never satisfied as an ever-recurring doubt in the minds of your British fellows is just what we want. For the present, too much, or too little was said and proved of us as M.A. Oxon justly remarked. We are ordered to set ourselves to work to sweep away the few vestiges for which fresh policy you are indebted to the incessant underground intrigues of our ex-friend M.R. Hume, now entirely in the hands of the brothers of the shadow, and the more our actual existence be doubted the better. As to tests and convincing proof to the Sadducees of Europe generally and those of England especially, this is something to be left entirely out of our future program. Unless allowed to use our own judgment and means, the course of future events will by no means run smooth. Thus you should never use such phrases as "for the sake of strength with friends at home," as they would be sure to do no good and would simply irritate the more the other powers that be to use the ridiculous phrase. It is not always flattering, good friend, to be placed even by those one likes the best on the same level with shells and mediums for the purpose of tests. I thought you had luckily outgrown that stage. Let us hold at present to the simply intellectual aspect of our intercourse and busy ourselves but with philosophy and your future paper, and leave the rest to time and its unforeseen developments. It is precisely because I follow and perceive the dual working of your mind in making such requests that I sign myself invariably your affectionate friend, K. H. Letter No. Licks received London about July, 1883. With whatever shortcomings my always indulgent L'Aquilo may have to charge me, he will, it appears, credit me with having given him a new source of enjoyment. For even the sombre prophecy of Sir Charles Turner, a recent obscuration of his, that you would fall into Roman Catholicism as the inevitable outcome of your dabbling in theosophy and believing in the K.H. Maya, has not dampened the ardour of your propaganda in the gay world of London. If this zeal should be cited by the altruist of Rothney, in support of his declaration that your grey vesicles are surcharged with tsigads aka, it will still doubtless be balm to your wounded feelings to know that you are essentially able to build the bridge over which the British metaphysicians may come within thinking distance of us. It is the custom among some good people to glance back at their life's path from the hillocks of time they annually surmount. So, if my hope has not betrayed me, you must have been mentally comparing your present greatest pleasure and constant occupation with that which was so in the olden time, when you threaded the streets of your metropolis, where the houses are as if painted in Indian ink, and a day's sunshine is an event to remember. You have measured yourself against yourself, and found the theosophist an anak morally as compared with the old man, the Beauval Sur, is it not so? Well, this is, perhaps, your reward, the beginning of it, the end you will realize. In Davachan, when floating along in the circumambient ether, instead of the circummud British Channel, foggy though that state may now appear to your mind's eye, then only will you see thyself by thyself and learn the true meaning of atm anam, atman apasia, to know itself en as a shining light. Requires no light to make itself perceived. Of the great Vedanta philosophy. Again and once more, an attempt has been made to dispel some of that great mist that I find in M.R. Massey's Davachan. It will appear as a contribution to the August number of the Theosophist. And to that I shall refer M.R. Massey and yourself. Quite possibly even then the obscuration will not be removed, and it may be thought that the intended explanation is nothing of the kind, and that, instead of winding the clock, a clumsy hand has but broken out some cogs. This is our misfortune, and I doubt if we shall ever get quite free of these obscurities and alleged contradictions, since there is no way to bring the askers and respondents face to face. Still, at the worst, it must be conceded that there is some satisfaction in the fact that there is now a ford across this river and you are building spans for a royal bridge. It is quite right that you should baptize your new brain babe with the water of hope, and, within the limits of possibility, that by it a further and very sensible impulse will be imparted to the present movement. But, friend, even the green cheese of the shining moon is periodically lunched upon by our aju, so do not think your self altogether above the contingency of popular fickleness, that would put out your light in favor of some new man's farthing dip. The culture of society more often inclines to lawn tennis philosophy than to that of the band adepts, whose wider game has worlds for balls, and etheric space for its shaven lawn. The PLDT of your first book was spiced with phenomena to tickle the spiritualistic palate. This second one is a dish of cold philosophy, and in your large section of London society you will scarcely find enough of the wine of sympathy to wash it down. Many, who now think you mildly mad, will buy the book to find out if a commission de lunatico should issue to prevent your doing more damage, but of all your readers few are likely to follow your lead towards our ashram. Still, the theosophist's duty is like that of the husbandman's, to turn his furrows and sow his grains as best he can. The issue is with nature, and she, the slave of law. I shall waste no condolences upon the Forlachelis because of the delicate weapons they can alone work with. A sorry day it would be to mankind if any sharper or deadlier one were put in their unaccustomed hands. Ah! You would concur with me, my faithful friend, if you could but see the plaint one of them has just made on account of the agonizing results of the poisoned weapons he got the wielding of, in an evil hour, through the help of a sorcerer. Crushed morally, by his own selfish impetuosity, rotting physically from diseases engendered by the animal gratifications he snatched with demon help, behind him is a black memory of wasted chances and hellish successes. Before him a pall of dark despair, of avicii. This wretched man turns his impotent rage against our starry science and ourselves, and hurls his ineffectual curses at those he vainly besieged for more powers in Kailashship, and whom he deserted for a necromantic guru who now leaves the victim to his fate. Be satisfied, friend, with your delicate weapons. If not as lethal as the discus of Vishnu, they can break dBW and many barriers if plied with power. The poor wretch in question confesses to a course of lies, breaches of faith, hatreds, temptings or misleadings of others, injustices, calumnies, perjuries, false pretenses, etc. The risk he voluntarily took, but he adds, if they, we, had been good and kind as well as wise and ninewerful, they, we, would have certainly prevented me from taking a task to which they knew I was unequal. In a word, we, who have gained our knowledge, such as it is, by the only practicable method, and who have no right to hinder any fellow man from making the attempt, though we have the right to warn, and we do warn every candidate, we are expected to take upon our own heads the penalty of such interference, or try to save ourselves from the same by making incompetents into adepts in spite of themselves. Because we did not do this, he is left to linger out a wretched existence as an animated poison bag, full of mental, moral, and physical corruption. This man has, in despair, turned from a heathen, an atheist, and a freethinker a Christian, or rather a theist, and now humbly submits to him, an extra cosmical God for whom he has even discovered a local, and to all delegated by him with lawful authority. And we, poor creatures, are traitors, liars, devils, and all his crimes, as enumerated above, are as a shining robe of glory compared to theirs, his capitals and underscorings being quoted as well as his words. Now friend, put away that thought that I ought not to compare your case with his, for I do not. I have only given you a glimpse into the hell of this lost soul, to show you what disaster may come upon the Lakila who snatches at forbidden power before his moral nature is developed to the point of fitness for its exercise. You must think well over the article Chellis and Lachelis which you will find in the supplement of the July Theosophist. So the Jesuit Mr. Crooks has placed one foot across the threshold for the sake of reading society's papers. Well and wisely done, and really brave of him. Heretofore he was bold enough to take a similar step and loyal enough to truth to disappoint his colleagues by making his facts public. When he was reading his invaluable paper smothered in the sections and the whole Royal Society trying to cough him down, metaphorically if not actually, as its sister society in America did to that martyr, he little thought how perfect a revenge karma had in store for him. Let him know that its cornucopia is not yet emptied. And that Western science has still 3 additional states of matter to discover. But he should not wait for us to condense ourselves to the stethoscopic standard as his Katie did, for we men are subject to laws of molecular affinity and polaric attraction which that sweet simulacrum was not hampered with. We have no favorites, break no rules. If Mr. Crooks would penetrate arcana beyond the corridors, the tools of modern science have already excavated. Let him try. He tried and found the radiometer, tried again, and found radiant matter, may try again and find the asterisk kamarupa of matter its 5th state. But to find its manas he would have to pledge himself stronger to secrecy than he seems inclined to. You know our motto, and that its practical application has erased the word impossible from the occultist's vocabulary. If he wearies not of trying, he may discover that most noble of all facts, his true self. But he will have to penetrate many strata before he comes to it. And to begin with, let him rid himself of the maya that any man living can set up claims upon adepts. He may create irresistible attractions and compel their attention, but they will be spiritual, not mental or intellectual. And this bit of advice applies and is directed to several British theosophists, and it may be well for them to know it. Once separated from the common influences of society, nothing draws us to any outsider save his evolving spirituality. He may be a Bacon or an Aristotle in knowledge, and still not even make his current felt a feather's weight by us, if his power is confined to the manas. The supreme energy resides in the buddhi, latent when wedded to Atman alone, active and irresistible when galvanized by the essence of asterisk manas, and when none of the dross of the latter commingles with that pure essence to weigh it down by its finite nature. Manas, pure and simple, is of a lower degree, and of the earth earthly, and so your greatest m.n count but as non-entities in the arena where greatness is measured by the standard of spiritual development. When the ancient founders of your philosophical schools came east, to acquire the lore of our predecessors, they filed no claims, except the single one of a sincere and unselfish hunger for the truth. If any now aspire to found new schools of science and philosophy, the same plan will win if the seekers have in them the elements of success. Yes, you are right about the Society for Psychic Research. Its work is of a kind to tell upon public opinion by experimentally demonstrating the elementary phases of occult science. H.S. Alcott has been trying to convert each of the Indian branches into such a school of research, but the capacity for sustained independent study for knowledge's sake is lacking, and must be developed. The success of the SPR will greatly aid in this direction, and we wish it well. I also go with you in your views as to the choice of the new president of the BTS. In fact, I concurred, I believe, before the choice was made. There is no reason why you should not attempt mesmeric cures by the help not of your locket but the power of your own will. Without this latter, in energetic function, no locket will do much good. The hair in it is in itself but an accumulator of the energy of him, who grew it, and can no more cure of itself than stored electricity can turn a will until liberated and conducted to the objective point. Set your will in motion and you at once draw upon the person upon whose head it, the hair not the will, grew, through the psychic current whichever runs between himself and his severed tress. To heal diseases it is not indispensable, however desirable, that the psychopathist should be absolutely pure. There are many in Europe and elsewhere who are not. If the healing be done under the impulse of perfect benevolence, unmixed with any latent selfishness, the philanthropist sets up a current which runs like a fine thrill through the sixth condition of matter, and is felt by him whom you summon to your help, if not at that moment engaged in some work which compels him to be repellent to all extraneous influences. The possession of a lock of any adept's hair is of course, a decided advantage, as a better tempered sword is to the soldier in battle, but the measure of its actual help to the psychopathist will be in ratio with the degree of will power he excites in himself and the degree of psychic purity in his motive. The talisman and his Buddhai are in sympathy. Now that you are at the center of modern Buddhistic exegesis, in personal relation with some of the clever commentators, from whom the holy devas deliver us, I shall draw your attention to a few things which are really as discreditable to the perceptions of even non-initiates, as they are misleading to the general public. The more one reads such speculations as those of Messrs. Rhys Davids, Lilly, etc., the less can one bring himself to believe that the unregenerate Western mind can ever get at the core of our abstruse doctrines. Yet hopeless as their cases may be, it would appear well worth the trouble of testing the intuitions of your London members of some of them, at any rate carried by half expiating through you one or two mysteries and leaving them to complete the chain themselves. Shall we take Mr. Rhys Davids as our first subject, and show that indirectly as he has done it, yet it is himself who strengthened the absurd ideas of Mr. Lilly, who fancies to have proved belief in a personal God in ancient Buddhism. Mr. Rhys Davids' Buddhism is full of the sparkle of our most impudent esotericism, but always, as it would seem, beyond not only his reach but apparently even his powers of intellectual perception. To avoid absurd metaphysics and its inventions, he creates unnecessary difficulties and falls headlong into inextricable confusion. He is like the Cape settlers who lived over diamond mines without suspecting it. I shall only instance the definition of Avalokitesvara on pp. 202 and 203. There, we find the author saying that to which any occultist seems a palpable absurdity, the name Avalokitesvara, which means * the Lord who looks down from on high * is a purely metaphysical invention. The curious use of the past particle passive * Avalokita in an active sense is clearly evident from the translation into Tibetan and Chinese. Now saying that it means, the Lord who looks down from on high, or, as he kindly explains further, the spirit of the Buddhas present in the church * is to completely reverse the sense. It is equivalent to saying Mr. Sinnett looks down from on high, his fragment of occult truth, on the British Theos Society, whereas it is the latter that looks up to Mr. Sinnett, or rather to his fragments as the, in their case only possible, expression and culmination of the knowledge sought for. This is no idle simile, and defines the exact situation. In short, Avalokitesvara literally interpreted means the Lord that is seen * Iswara, implying moreover, rather the adjective than the noun, lordly, self-existent lordliness, not Lord. It is, when correctly interpreted, in one sense * the divine self perceived or seen by self, the Atman or seventh principle ridded of its Mayavic distinction from its universal source which becomes the object of perception for, and by the individuality centered in Buddhai, the sixth principle, something that happens only in the highest state of samadhi. This is applying it to the microcosm. In the other sense Avalokitesvara implies the seventh universal principle, as the object perceived by the universal Buddhai mind or intelligence, which is the synthetic aggregation of all the Dhyan Kohans, as of all other intelligences whether great or small, that ever were, are, or will be. Nor is it the asterisk spirit of Buddhas present in the church, but the omnipresent universal spirit in the temple of nature in one case, and the seventh principle the Atman in the temple. Man in the other. Mr. Rhys Davids MIG-HT have, at least remembered, the, to him, familiar simile made by the Christian adept, the Kabbalistic Paul, no ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you and thus avoided to have made a mess of the name. Though as a grammarian he detected the use of the past particle passive, yet he shows himself far from an inspired Panini in overlooking the true cause and saving his grammar by raising the hue and cry against metaphysics. And yet, he quotes Beale's Catena as his authority for the invention, when, in truth, this work is perhaps the only one in English that gives an approximately correct explanation of the word, at any rate, on page 374. Self-manifested how? It is asked. Speech or VDCH was regarded as the Son or the manifestation of the eternal self, and was adored under the name of Avalokitesvara, the manifested God. This shows as clearly as can be that Avalokitesvara is both the unmanifested Father and the manifested Son, the latter proceeding from, and identical with, the other, namely, the Pararam and Jividaman, the universal and the individualized seventh principle. The passive and the active, the latter the word, logos, the verb. Call it by whatever name, only let these unfortunate, deluded Christians know that the real Christ of every Christian is the VDCH, the mystical voice, while the Manchu was but a mortal like any of us, an adept more by his inherent purity and ignorance of real evil, than by what he had learned with his initiated rabbis and the already, at that period, fast degenerating Egyptian hierophants and priests. A great mistake is also made by Baal, who says, this name, Avalokitesvara, in Chinese took the form of Quan Shi Yin, and the divinity worshipped under that name, was, generally regarded as a female. 374, Quan Shi Yin or the universally manifested voice is active male, and must not be confounded with Quan Yin, or Budhai the spiritual soul, the sixth prince, and the vehicle of its lord. It is Quan Im that is the female principle or the manifested passive, Mani. Festing itself to every creature in the universe, in order to deliver all men from the consequences of sin as rendered by Baal, this once quite correctly, 383, while Quan Shi Yin, the Son identical with his Father is the absolute activity, hence having no direct relation to objects of sense is passivity. What a common ruse it is of your Aristotelians! With the sleuth-hound's persistence they track an idea to the very verge of the impassable chasm, and then brought to bay leave the metaphysicians to take up the trail if they can, or let it be lost. It is but natural that a Christian theologian, a missionary, should act upon this line, since as easily perceived even in the little I gave out just now, a too correct rendering of our Avalokitesvara and Quan Shi Yin might have very disastrous effects. It would simply amount to showing Christendom, the true and undeniable origin of the awful and incomprehensible mysteries of its Trinity, transubstantiation, immaculate conception, as also whence their ideas of the Father, Son, Spiritus, and Mother. It is less easy to shuffle al Piacere the cards of Buddhistic chronology than those of Krishna and Christ. They cannot place however much they would the birth of our Lord Sungya's Buddha AD, as they have contrived to place that of Krishna. But why should an atheist and a materialist like Mr. Rhys Davids so avoid the correct rendering of our dogmas even when he happens to understand them, which does not happen every day, is something surpassingly curious. In this instance the blind and guilty Rhys Davids leads the blind and innocent Mr. Lilly into the ditch, where the latter, catching at the proffered straw, rejoices in the idea that Buddhism teaches in reality a personal God. Does your BTS know the meaning of the white and black interlaced triangles, of the parent society seal that it has also adopted? Shall I explain? The double triangle viewed by the Jewish Kabbalists as Solomon's seal, is, as many of you doubtless know, the Sri Karat Anthara of the archaic Aryan temple, the mystery of mysteries, a geometrical synthesis of the whole occult doctrine. The two interlaced triangles are the Buddha and Karat gums of creation. They contain the squaring of the circle, the philosophical stone, the great problems of life and death, and the mystery of evil. The Kila who can explain this sign from every one of its aspects is virtually an adept. How is it then that the only one among you, who has come so near to unraveling the mystery, is also the only one who got none of her ideas from books? Unconsciously she gives out to him who has the key the first syllable of the ineffable name. Of course you know that the double triangle, the Satkari Chakram of Vishaya, or the six-pointed star, is the perfect seven. In all the old Sanskrit works, Vedic and Tantric, you find the number 6 mentioned more often than 7, this last figure, the central point, being implied, for it is the germ of the 6 and their matrix. It is then thus: Karat, the central point, standing for 7th, and 1. At this point in the original there is a rough drawing of the interlaced triangles inscribed in a circle. Ed. The circle, the Mahatma, endless space, Karat for the 7th universal principle. In one sense, both are viewed as Avalokitesvara, for they are respectively the macrocosm and the microcosm. The interlaced triangles, Karat, the upper pointing one is wisdom concealed, and the downward pointing gone wisdom revealed, in the phenomenal world. The circle indicates the bounding dash, circumscribing quality of the all, the universal principle which, from any given point, expands so as to embrace all things, while embodying the potentiality of every action in the cosmos. As the point then is the center round which the circle is traced, they are identical and one, and though from the standpoint of Maya and avidya, illusion and ignorance, one is separated from the other by the manifested triangle, the three sides of which represent the three gunas finite attributes. In symbology, the central point is Jivitna, the 7th principle, and hence Avalokitesvara, the Quanchayin, the manifested asterisk voice, or logos, the germ point of manifested activity, hence in the phraseology of the Christian Kabbalists the son of the father and mother, and agreeably to ours the self manifested in self-yasin, the one form of existence, the child of Dharmakaya, the universally diffused essence, both male and female. Parabrahm or Adi Buddha, while acting through that germ point outwardly as an active force, reacts from the circumference inwardly as the supreme but latent potency. The double triangles symbolize the great passive and the great active, the male and female, Purusha and Prakriti. Each triangle is a trinity because presenting a triple aspect. The white represents in its straight lines, Nanam, knowledge, Nada, the knower, and Nayam, that which is known. The black form, color, and substance, also the creative, preservative, and destructive forces, and are mutually correlating, etc., etc. Well may you admire, and more should you wonder at the marvelous lucidity of that remarkable seeress, who, ignorant of Sanskrit or Pali, and thus shut out from their metaphysical treasures, has yet seen a great light shining from behind the dark hills of exoteric religions. How, think you, did the writers of the Perfect Way come to know that Adonai was the Son and not the Father, or that the third person of the Christian Trinity is female? Verily, they lay in that work several times their hands upon the keystone of occultism. Only does the lady who persists using without an explanation the misleading term God in her writings know how nearly she comes up to our doctrine when saying, having for father, spirit which is life, the endless circle or Parabrahm, and for mother the great deep, which is substance, Prakriti in its undifferentiated condition. Adonai possesses the potency of both and wields the dud powers of all things. We would say triple, but in the sense as given this will do. Pythagoras had a reason for never using the finite, useless figure 2, and for altogether discarding it. The one can, when manifesting, become only 3. The unmanifested when a simple duality remains passive and concealed. The dual monad. The 7th and 6th principles, has, in order to manifest itself as a logos, the Quanchayin to first become a triad, seventh, sixth, and half of the fifth, then, on the bosom of the great deep attracting within itself the one circle form out of it the perfect square, thus squaring the circle the greatest of all the mysteries, friend, and inscribing within the latter the word, the ineffable name, otherwise the duality could never tarry as such, and would have to be reabsorbed into the one. The deep is space both male and female. Punish, as Brahma, breathes. In the eternity, when he inbreathes Prakriti, as manifested substance, disappears in his bosom, when he owi breathes she reappears as Maya, says the sloka. The one reality is Mula Prakriti, undifferentiated substance, the rootless root, but we have to stop, lest there should remain but little to tell for your own intuition. Well may the geometer of the RS not know that the apparent absurdity of attempting to square the circle covers a mystery ineffable. It would hardly be found among the foundation stones of Mr. Rodin Noel's speculations upon the pneumatical body of our Lord, nor among the debris of Mr. Farmer's a new basis of belief in immortality, and to many such metaphysical minds it would be worse than useless to divulge the fact, that the unmanifested circle the Father, or absolute life is non-existent outside the triangle and perfect square, and is only manifested in the Son, and that it is when, reversing the action and returning to its absolute state of unity, and the square expands once more into the circle that the Son returns to the bosom of the Father. There it remains until called back by his mother the great deep, to remanifest as a triad, the Son partaking at once of the essence of the Father, and of that of the Mother the active substance, Prakriti in its differentiated condition. My mother, Sophia the manifested wisdom, took me, says Jesus in a Gnostic treatise, and he asks his disciples to tarry till he comes. The true word may only be found by tracing the mystery of the passage inward and outward of the eternal life, through the states typified in these three geometric figures. The criticism of a student of occultism, whose wits are sharpened by the mountain air of his home, and the answer of *STK. Cherry, June Theosophist, upon a part of your annular and circular expositions need not annoy or disturb in any way your philosophic calm. As our Pondicherry Keela significantly says, neither you nor any other man across the threshold has had or ever will have the complete theory of evolution taught to him, or get it unless he guesses it for himself. If anyone can unravel it from such tangled threads as are given him, very well, and a fine proof it would be indeed of his or her spiritual insight. Some have come very near it. But yet there is always with the best of them just enough error, coloring, and misconception, the shadow of manas projecting across the field of buddhi to prove the eternal law that only the unshackled spirit shall see the things of the spirit without a veil. No untaught amateur could ever rival the proficient in this branch of research, yet the world's real revelators have been few, and its pseudo-saviors legion, and fortunate it is if their half-glimpses of the light are not, like Islam, enforced at the sword's point, or like Christian theology, amid blazing faggots and in torture chambers. Your fragments contain some still very few errors, due solely to your two preceptors of Udyar, one of whom would not, and the other could not tell you all. The rest could not be called mistakes, rather incomplete explanations. These are due, partly to your own imperfect education in your last theme, I mean the ever-threatening obscurations, partly to the poor vehicles of language at our disposal, and in part again, to the reserve imposed upon us by rule. Yet, all things considered, they are few and trivial, while as to those noticed by a student, etc. The Marcus Aurelius of Simla, in your No. 7, it will be pleasant to you to know that every one of them, however now seeming to you contradictory, can, and if it should seem necessary shall, be easily reconciled with facts. The trouble is that, a. you cannot be given the real figures and difference in the rounds, and, b. that you do not open doors enough for explorers. The bright luminary of the BTS and the intelligences that surround her, embodied I mean, may help you to see the flaws, at all events try. Asterisk nothing was ever lost by trying. You share with all beginners the tendency to draw too absolutely strong inferences from partly caught hints, and to dogmatize thereupon as though the last word had been spk ken. You will correct this in due time. You may misunderstand us, are more than likely to do so, for our language must always be more or less that of parable and suggestion. When treading upon forbidden ground, we have our own peculiar modes of expression, and what lies behind the fence of words is even more important than what you read. But still try. Perhaps if Mr. S. Moses could know just what was meant by what was said to him, and about his intelligences, he would find all strictly true. As he is a man of interior growth, his D-Y may come and his reconciliation with the occultists be complete. Who knows? Meanwhile, I shall, with your permission, close this first volume. Kh. My good friend Shakespeare said truly that our doubts are traitors. Why should you doubt or create in your mind ever-growing monsters? A little more knowledge in occult laws would have set your mind at rest long ago, avoided many a tear to your gentle lady and pang to yourself. Know then that even the chalice of the same guru are often made to separate and keep apart for long months while the process of development is going on simply on account of the two contrary magnetisms that, attracting each other, prevent mutual and individualized development in some one direction. There is no offense meant or even possible. This ignorance has caused of late immense suffering on all sides. When shall you trust implicitly, in my heart if not in my wisdom, for which I claim no recognition on your part? It is extremely painful to see you wandering about in a dark labyrinth created by your own doubts, every issue of which, moreover, you close with your own hands. I believe you are now satisfied with my portrait made by Herr Schmiechin and as dissatisfied with the one you have. Yet all are like in their way. Only while the others are the productions of Chellis, the last one was painted with MS hand on the artist's head and often on his arm. Pray remain for the Wednesday meeting if you feel you are not to leave the inner circle. Otherwise go, remembering my friendship had warned you. Only avoid, if you do, hurting the feelings of those who sin through an excess, not lack of devotion. Letter No. Alexei Sinat Sahib is, my respectful salams, informed that his guardian is occupied upon official business, that he cannot give even a moment's consideration to the LL or its members, nor to write him individually whether by pen or precipitation, the more difficult, not to say costly, method of the two to our reputations in the West anyhow. Mohini cannot stop in London indefinitely, nor for any reader length of time, as he has duties to perform elsewhere, duties to his family as well as others to the Theosophical Society. Besides being a Keela and so not a free an in the ordinary acceptation of the term, he has numerous mouths to feed at Calcutta and more over must earn enough more to repay the friend who advanced him £2 money towards the expenses of his present mission, whatever Kh. may or may not do for him, something he is prohibited counting upon as every other Keela. At the same time let it be known to you that he needs temporary change of climate. He suffered greatly from cold in that high room where there is no fireplace in your house, and Kh. had to surround him with a double shell against a death cold that threatened him. Remember, Hindus are exotic plants in your inclement pace and cold, and those who need them have to take care of them. If when annoying Alcott on Sunday last to tell you this information, I did not make him tell you, and add this, it is, because I wanted to spare him in your mind already prejudiced against him and inclining towards a belief that he spoke out of his head. Again, if you need Mohini's help at London, the Theosophists at Paris require it even more, since their occult education is inferior to yours. It is planned that he should divide his time equally among all the European centers of spiritual activity, and if he is now required at Paris on the INST, he will also be allowed To come back to London when the continental movement is fairly inaugurated. In any event you will have Alcott the better part of the time. But fear not, if Henry is allowed to prolong his stay in London he will not worry either of you by coming down in his extravagant Asiatic undresses, for he will not stop with you but with the Arundale's ladies as ordered before now, the order being reiterated by me when Madam Sahib remarked it was better he should stop where he was after Upasika had left. Nor is Alcott worse than many others. And though some persons may not concede it, there are worse wranglers than he. I must not close without letting you know that in the Kingsford Row justice is no longer on your side. Though unwilling to confess you show spite, Sahib, personal spite. You have defeated her and you would now mortify and punish her. This is not right. You ought to learn to dissociate your consciousness from your external self more than you do if ye would not lose kh. For he is much annoyed at what goes on. Excuse MV remarks, but it is for your own benefit. I beg your pardon. Letter No. LXII received 18.7.84. My poor, blind friend, you are entirely unfit for practical occultism. Its laws are immutable, and no one can go back on an order once given. She can send on no letters to me, and the letter ought to have been given to Mohini. However, I have read it, and I am determined to make one more effort, the last that I am permitted, to open your inner intuition. If my voice, the voice of one who was ever friendly to you in the human principle of his being, fails to reach you as it has often before, then our separation in the present and for all times to come becomes unavoidable. It pains me for you, whose heart I read so well every protest and doubt of your purely intellectual nature, of your cold Western reason notwithstanding. But my first duty is to my master, and duty, let me tell you, is for us, stronger than any friendship or even love, as without this abiding principle which is the indestructible cement that has held together for so many millenniums, the scattered custodians of nature's grand secrets, our brotherhood, nay, our doctrine itself would have crumbled long ago into unrecognizable atoms. Unfortunately, however great your purely human intellect, your spiritual intuitions are dim and hazy, having been never developed. Hence, whenever you find yourself confronted by an apparent contradiction, by a difficulty, a kind of inconsistency of occult nature, one that is caused by our time-honored laws and regulations, of which you know nothing, for your time has not yet come, forthwith your doubts are aroused, your suspicions bud out, and one finds that they have made mock at your better nature, which is finally crushed down by all these deceptive appearances of outward things. You have not the faith required to allow your will to arouse itself in defiance and contempt against your purely worldly intellect, and give you a better understanding of things hidden and laws unknown. You are unable, I see, to force your better aspirations, fed at the stream of a real devotion to the Maya you have made yourself of me, a feeling in you, that has always profoundly touched me, to lift up the head against cold, spiritically blind reason, to allow your heart to pronounce loudly and proclaim that, which it has hitherto only been allowed to whisper, patience, patience. A great design has never been snatched at once. You were told, however, that the path to occult sciences has to be trodden laboriously and crossed at the danger of life, that every new step in it leading to the final goal, is surrounded by pitfalls and cruel thorns, that the pilgrim who ventures upon it is made first to confront and conquer the 1,001 furies who keep watch over its adamantine gates and entrance, furies called doubt, skepticism, scorn, ridicule, envy, and finally temptation, especially the latter, and that he, who would see beyond, had to first destroy this living wall, that he must be possessed of a heart and soul clad in steel, and of an iron, never failing determination, and yet be meek and gentle, humble, and have shut out from his heart every human passion, that leads to evil. Are you all this? Have you ever begun a course of training which would lead to it? No, you know it as I do. You are not born for it, nor are you in a posy. A family man with his wife and child to support, with work to do, fitted in any way for the life of an ascetic, not even of a Mohini. Then why should you complain that powers are not given you, that even proof of our own powers begins to fail you? Etc. True, you have offered several times to give up meat and drink, and I have refused. Since you cannot become a regular Kila, why should you? I thought you had understood all this long ago, that you had resigned yourself, satisfied to wait patiently for future developments and for my personal freedom. You know I was the only one to attempt and persevere in my idea of the necessity of, at least, a small reform, of however slight a relaxation from the extreme rigidity of our regulations if we would see European theosophists increase and work for the enlightenment and good of humanity. I failed in my attempt. As you know, all I could obtain was to be allowed to communicate with a few, you, foremost of all, since I had chosen you as the exponent of our doctrine that we had determined to give out to the world to some extent at least. Unable on account of work to continue my teaching regularly, I was decided to resume it after my work had been done, and I had a few hours of leisure at my disposal. As tied hand and foot when I made that attempt to let you have a paper of your own. I was not poor mit to use any psychical powers in that matter. You know the results. Yet, I would have succeeded even with the small means of action I had at my disposal had it not been for the Ilbert Bill excitement. Have you ever given a thought, or ever suspected the real reason of my failure? No, for you know nothing of the ins and outs of the work of karma, of the side blows of this terrible law. But you do know that there was a time when you felt the profoundest contempt for us all, of the dark races, and had regarded the Hindus as an inferior race. I will say no more. If you have any intuition, you will work out cause and effect and perhaps realize whence the failure. There again you had against you the command of our Supreme Chief not to interfere with the natural growth of the LL. And the development psychic and spiritual of its members, especially with yours. You know that even to write to you occasionally, has been permitted only as a special favor after the Phoenix failure. As to the exhibition of any psychic or occult powers, that was, and still is, entirely out of question. You felt astonished at the interference in the quarrel between the LL and Kingsford? And you are unable yet to realize why we did this and that. Believe me that you will learn some day when you know better that it was all brought on by yourself. You also resent the apparent absurdity of entrusting HSO with a mission you find him unfit for in London, at any rate, socially and intellectually. Well, some day, perchance, you may also learn that you were equally wrong in this, as in many other things. Coming results may teach you a better lesson. And now to the latest development, to the proof that you were not unjustly treated as you complain in your letter, though you have treated both HSO and HPB in a very cruel way. Your greatest grievance is caused by your perplexity. It is agonizing, you say, to be ever kept in the dark, etc. You feel profoundly hurt at what you choose to call an evident and growing unfriendliness, the change of tone and so on. You are mistaken from first to last. There was neither unfriendliness nor any change of feeling. You simply mistook M's natural brusqueness whenever he speaks or writes seriously. As for my short remarks about you to HPB, who appealed to me and who was in her right, you never thought of the real and true reason. I had no time, I could hardly give a passing thought to yourself or the LL. As well said by her, no one has ever thought of accusing you of any intentional wrong to either ourselves or Chellis. As to an unintentional one happily prevented in time by me, there was one certainly, carelessness. You never thought of the difference between the constitution of a Bengali and that of an Englishman, the power of endurance of one, and the same power in the other. Mohini was left for days in a very cold room without a fireplace. He never uttered one word of complaint, and I had to protect him from a serious illness. To give him my time and attention, to him I so needed to bring about certain results, to him who had sacrificed everything for me. Hence, M's tone you complain of. Now you have it explained, that you were not unjustly treated but simply had to submit to a remark which it was impossible for you to avoid. since the mistake might have happened again. Then you deny there ever was any spite in you against K. Very well, call it by any other name you like, yet it was a feeling that interfered with strict justice, and made O. commit a still worse blunder than he had already committed, but which was allowed to take its course, for it suited our purposes and did no great harm except to him self alone, who was so ungenerously snubbed for it. You accuse him of having done mischief to your society, and perhaps, irretrievably. Where is the harm done? You are again mistaken. It is your nerves that made you write to HPB. Words I would you had never uttered for your own sake. Shall I prove to you at any rate in one case how utterly unjust you have been in suspecting either of them, of having either complained or told falsehoods to us about you? I trust, however, that you will never repeat what I will tell you, i.e., who it was, or might have been but was not, for she came too late, my innocent informer about Mohini. You are at liberty to verify it one day, but I would not have that most excellent woman feel discomforted or miserable on my account. It was Madame Guihard whom I had promised to visit subjectively. I saw her one morning, when I was busy with Mohini making him impermeable descending the stairs. She had heard his teeth chatter, as he was also coming down from the floor above. She knew he was still in his little fireless room days after Alcott had gone, and when he might have been easily placed in the next room. She had stopped to wait for him, and as I looked into her I heard the words pronounced mentally, "Well, well. If his master only knew." And then stopping on the landing she asked him if he would not have some additional warm clothing and such other kind words. His master knew and had already remedied the evil, and knowing also, that it was unintentional, felt no unfriendliness at the time, for he knows Europeans too well to expect from them more than they can give. Nor was it the only mute reproach I found addressed to you in Madame Gebhard's heart, as in the minds of several others of your friends, and it is but right that you should know it, remembering that like yourself they judge nearly everything on appearance. I will say no more. But, if you would have another look at karma, ponder over the above, and remember that it ever works in the most unexpected ways. And now put yourself the question how far you were justified in entertaining suspicions against Alcott, who knew nothing of the circumstances whatever, and against HPB, who was at Paris and knew still less. Nevertheless, were suspicion degenerated into conviction, and became objectivist in written reproaches and very ungenerous expressions, which were, moreover, from first to last, undeserved. All this notwithstanding, you complained bitterly yesterday to Miss A. of Madame B.'s answer to you, which was making every allowance for the peculiar circumstances, and her own temper was surprisingly mild when confronted with your letter to her. Nor can I approve of your attitude to Alcott if my advice and opinion are wanted. Had you been in his place and guilty, you would have hardly permitted him to accuse you in such terms of falsification, slandering, lies, falsehoods, and the most idiotic incompetency for his work. And Alcott is entirely innocent of any such sin. As to his work, we really must be permitted to know better. What we want is good results, and you will find that we have them. Verily, suspicion overturns what confidence builds. And if, on the one hand, you have some reasons to quote Bacon against us, and say that there is nothing that makes a man suspect much, more than to know little, on the other hand you ought also to remember that our knowledge and science cannot be pursued altogether on the Baconian methods. We are not permitted, come what may, to offer it as a remedy against, or to cure people from suspicion. They have to earn it for themselves, and he who will not find our truths in his soul and within himself has poor chances of success in occultism. It is certainly not suspicion that will mend the situation, for it is hits JF. A heavy armor, and with its own weight impedes more than it protects. With this last remark we may, I think, let this matter drop forever. You have brought suffering upon yourself, upon your lady. and many others which was quite useless and might have been avoided had you only abstained from creating yourself most of its causes. All that Miss Arundel told you was right and well said. You are yourself ruining that which you have so laboriously erected, but then, the strange idea that we are quite unable to see for ourselves that our only data is that, which we find in our Chella's minds, hence that we are not the powerful beings you have represented us, seems to haunt you with every day. More. Hume has begun in the same way. I would gladly help you and protect you from his fate, but unless you shake off yourself the ghastly influence that is upon you, I can do very little. You ask me if you can tell Miss Arundel what / told you through *MRS. You are quite at liberty to explain to her the situation, and thereby justify in her eyes your seeming disloyalty and rebellion against us as she thinks. You can do so the more since I have never bound you to anything through *MRS. Never communicate with you or anyone else through her, nor have any of my, or Ms. Chellas, to my knowledge except in America, once at Paris and another time at Mrs.'s house. She is an excellent but quite undeveloped clairvoyant. Had she not been imprudently meddled with, and had you followed the old woman's and Mohini's advice indeed, by this time I might have spoken with you through her, and such was our intention. It is again your own fault, my good friend. You have proudly claimed the privilege of exercising your own, uncontrolled judgment in occult matters you could know nothing about, and the occult laws you believe you can defy and play with impunity have turned round upon you and have badly hurt you. It is all as it should be. If, throwing aside every preconceived idea, you could try and impress yourself with this profound truth that intellect is not all-powerful by itself, that to become a mover of mountains it has first to receive life and light from its higher principle spirit, and then would fix your eyes upon everything occult spiritually trying to develop the faculty according to the rules, then you would soon read the mystery right. You need not tell Mrs. that she has never seen correctly, for it is not so. Many a time she saw correctly when left alone to herself, never has she left one single statement undisfigured. And now I have done. You have two roads lying before you, one leading through a very dreary path toward knowledge and truth, the other. But really I must not influence your mind. If you are not prepared to break with us altogether, then I would ask you not only to be present at the meeting but also to speak, as it will otherwise produce a very unfavorable impression. This I ask you to do for my sake and also for your own. Only whatever you do, let me advise you not to stop midway, it may prove disastrous to you. So far my friendship for you remains the same as ever, for we never were yet ungrateful for services rendered. Letter No. L8 received London, summer, 1884. Good friend, when our first correspondence began, there was no idea then of any publications being issued on the basis of the replies you might receive. You went on putting questions at random and the answers being given at different times to disjointed queries, and, so to say, under a semi-protest, were necessarily imperfect, often from different standpoints. When the publication of some of these were permitted for the occult world, it was hoped that among your readers some may be able, like yourself, to put all the different pieces together and evolve out of them the skeleton or a shadow of our system which, although not exactly the original, this would be an impossibility, would be as near an approach to it as could be made by a non-initiate. But the results have proved quasi-disastrous. We had tried an experiment and sadly failed. Now we see that none but those who have passed at least their third initiation are able to write upon those subjects comprehensively. A Herbert Spencer would have made a mess of it under your circumstances. Mohini is certainly not quite right, in some details he is positively wrong, but so are you, my old friend. Though the outside reader is none the wiser for it, and no one, so far, has noticed the real vital errors in esoteric Buddhism and man, nor are they likely to. We can give no further information on the subject already approached by you, and have to leave the facts already communicated to be woven into a consistent and systematic philosophy by the Chellas at the headquarters. The secret doctrine will explain many things, set to right more than one perplexed student. Therefore, to put before the world all the crude and complicated materials in your possession in the shape of old letters, in which, I confess, much was purposely made obscure, would only be making confusion worse confounded. Instead of doing any good thereby to yourself and others, it would only place you in a still more difficult position, bring criticism upon the heads of the masters, and thus have a retarding influence on human progress and the T.S. Hence I protest most strongly against your new idea. Leave to the secret doctrine the task of avenging you. My letters must not be published, in the manner you suggest, but on the contrary, if you save Jewel K. trouble, copies of some should be sent to the literary committee at Udyar, about which Damodar has written to you, so that with the assistance of SYK, Charya, Jewel K, Subbaro, and the secret committee, from which HPB was purposely excluded by us to avoid new suspicions and calumnies, they might be able to utilize the information for the realization of the object with which the committee was started, as explained by Damodar in the letter written by him under orders. It is neither new *Kittle developments that I seek to avoid, nor criticism directed against my personality, which indeed can hardly be reached, but I rather try to save yourself and society from new troubles which would be serious this time. The letters, in short, were not written for publication or public comment upon them, but for private use, and neither M nor I would ever give our consent to see them thus handled. As regards your first letter, DJK has been instructed to attend to it. In such delicate matters I am still less competent to give advice than to satisfy aspiring cellists of the LCH sort. I am afraid the poor, dear Mrs. Holloway is showing her white teeth, and would hardly be found now a charming companion. Under instructions, Alcott wrote a letter to Finch which gives the key to the little problem. It is Fern, Murad Ali, Bishan Lal, and other wrecks, over again. Why shall would-be cellists with such intense, self-personalities, enforce themselves within the enchanted and dangerous circle of probation? Pardoning me short letter, I am very busy just now with the coming New Year. KH letter no. LXIV received London, summer, 1884. Entirely private except for Mohini and F. A good friend, this is not an answer to your last. The letter to my address sent by you through Mohini was never written by yourself. Verily it was penned by one, at that time, entirely under the influence of a creature of Adavi character, the sin of self, who in the universe as in a mirror sees her fond face shown and only hers, whose every word he then implicitly trusted. Perhaps, this is to a certain extent a justification, because there came no half-expected interference, no word of warning from our quarters. Thus no response to it, for we rather turn a new page. Ah, how long shall the mysteries of Keelaship overpower and lead astray from the path of truth the wise and perspicacious, as much as the foolish and the credulous? How few of the many pilgrims who have to start without chart or compass on that shoreless ocean of occultism reach the wished-for land. Believe me, faithful friend, that nothing short of full confidence in us, in our good motives if not in our wisdom, in our foresight, if not omniscience which is not to be found on this earth, can help one to cross over from one's land of dream and fiction to our truth land, the region of stern reality and fact. Otherwise the ocean will prove shoreless indeed, its weaves will carry one no longer on waters of hope, but will turn every ripple into doubt and suspicion, and bitter shall they prove to him who starts on that dismal, tossing sea of the unknown, with a prejudiced mind. Nevertheless, feel not too much perplexed. The hour of trial is half over, try rather to understand the whys and what-fers of the situation, to study more seriously the laws that govern our occult world. I grant you, those laws do seem very often unjust, even, at times cruel. But this is due to the fact that they were never meant either for the immediate redress of wrongs, or the direct help of those who offer at random their allegiance to the legislators. Still, the seemingly real, the evanescent and quick-passing evils they bring about are as necessary to the growth, progress, and final establishment of your small-th society as those certain cataclysms in nature, which often decimate whole populations, are necessary to mankind. An earthquake may, for all the world knows, be a bliss, and a tidal wave prove salvation to the many at the expense of the few. The fittest were seen to survive in the destruction of every old race and made to merge into, and assimilate with the new, for nature is older than Darwin. Say rather, then, to yourself, whatever happened there can be no cause for regret, for it is not so much that new facts should be revealed to the inner group as that old puzzles and mysteries should have been explained and made clear to its few entirely staunch members. Even an innocent quotation mark fallen from under my pencil and by you objected to, would have had a world of meaning for one less beclouded than you were in writing your last letter, based entirely on the crafty insinuations of your would-be Sibyl. It was absolutely necessary that within the personal experience of those few staunch members, yourself included, the secret working of karma should take place, that its deeper meaning should be practically illustrated, as also its effects, on those self-opinionated volunteers and candidates for Keelaship who will rush under the dark shadow of her wheels. As against the above, some will say, how then about her great clairvoyance, her Keelaship, her selection among the many by the masters? Her clairvoyance is a fact, her selection and Keelaship another. However, well fitted psychically and physiologically to answer such selection, unless possessed of spiritual, as well as of physical unselfishness, Aquila, whether selected or not, must perish, as Aquila in the long run. Self-personality, vanity and conceit harbored in the higher principles are enormously more dangerous than the same defect inherent only in the lower physical nature of man. They are the breakers against which the cause of Keelaship, in its probationary stage, is sure to be dashed to pieces unless the would-be disciple carries with him the white shield of perfect confidence and trust in those he would seek out through mount and vale to guide him safely toward the light of knowledge. The world moves and lives under the shadow of the deadly upas tree of evil, yet its dripping is dangerous too, and can reach only those whose higher and middle natures are as much susceptible of infection as their lower one. Its venomous seed can germinate but in a willing, well-prepared soil. Bring to your memory the cases of Fern, Murad Ali, and Bisham Lal, good friend, and remember what you have learnt. The mass of human sin and frailty is distributed throughout the life of man who is content to remain an average mortal. It is gathered in and centered, so to say, within one period of the Hafeh of Aquila, the period of probation. That, which is generally accumulating to find its legitimate issue only in the next rebirth of an ordinary man, is quickened and fanned into existence in the Keela, especially in the presumptuous and selfish candidate who rushes in without having calculated his forces. One who dug so many and deep pitfalls for her friends and brothers fell into them herself, said M. to HPB. On the night of the mutual revelations. I tried to, but could not save her. She had entered, or rather I should say forced herself into the dangerous path with a double purpose in view, to upset the whole structure in which she had no part, and thus obstruct the path to all others, if she did not find the system and society at the level of her expectations, and, 2, to remain true and work out her Keelaship and natural gifts, that are considerable indeed, only if those expectations were all answered. It is the intensity of that resolution that first attracted my attention. Led on gradually and gently into the right direction, the acquisition of such an individuality would have been invaluable. But there are persons, who, without ever having any external sign of selfishness, are intensely selfish in their inner spiritual aspirations. These will follow the path once chosen by them with their eyes closed to the interest of all but themselves, and see nothing outside the narrow pathway filled with their own personality. They are so intensely absorbed in the contemplation of their own supposed righteousness that nothing can ever appear right to them outside the focus of their own vision, distorted by their self-complacent contemplation, and their judgment of the right and wrong. Alas, such an one is our new, mutual friend LCH. The right in thee is base, the wrong a curse, was said by our Lord Buddha for such as she, for right and wrong cheat such as love themselves, and the others only in proportion to the benefits derived, though these benefits be purely spiritual. Aroused some 18 months ago to spasmodic, hysterical curiosity by the perusal of your occult world and later on by that of esoteric Buddhism to enthusiastic envy, she determined to find out the truth as she expressed it. She would either become Aquila herself first and foremost, to right hooks, thus eclipsing her lay rival, or upset the whole imposture in which she had no concern. She decided to go to Europe and seek you out. Her sure-excited fancy, putting a mask on every stray spook, created the student and made him serve her purpose and desire. She believed in it sincerely. At this juncture, foreseeing the new danger, I interfered. Darb, Nath was dispatched and made to impress her thrice in my name. Her thoughts were for a certain period guided, her clairvoyance made to serve a purpose. Had her sincere aspirations conquered the intense personality of her lower self, I would have given the TS an excellent help and worker. The poor woman is naturally good and moral, but that very purity is of so narrow a kind, of so Presbyterian a character, if I may use the word, as to be unable to see itself reflected in any other but her own self. She alone is good and pure. All others must and shall be suspected. One great boon was offered her: her wayward spirit would allow her to accept of none that was not shaped in accordance with her own model. And now she will receive a letter from me which will contain my ultimatum and conditions. She will not accept them, but will complain bitterly to several among you, suggesting new hints and insinuations against one whom she professes to adore. Prepare. A plank of salvation is offered to her, but there is very little hope that she will accept it. However, I will try once more, but I have no right to influence her either way. If you will accept my advice, abstain from any serious correspondence with her until some fresh developments. Try to save man by looking it over with Mohini, and by erasing from it the alleged inspirations and dictation by student. Having had also an object and a purpose in view, I had to leave her under her self-delusion that this new book was written with the view of correcting the mistakes of esoteric Buddhism, of killing it. Carrot was the true thought, and it was only on the eve of her departure that Upasika was ordered to see that Mohini should carefully expunge from it all the objectionable passages. During her stay in England, Mrs. H would have never permitted you to see her book before the final publication. But I would save 5 months' labor of Mohini and will not permit it to remain unpublished. Much as remains unexplained, the little you may have gathered from this letter may serve its purpose. It will start your thoughts in a new direction and will have unveiled another corner in the domain of psychological ISIS. If you would learn and acquire occult knowledge, you have, my friend, to remember that such tuition opens in the stream of Kilaship many an unforeseen channel to whose current even a lay kilo must perforce yield, or else strand upon the shoals, and knowing this to abstain for ever judging on mere appearance. The ice is broken once more. Profit by it if you may. Letter No. LXV received London, summer, 1884. My friend, you ask me to throw legate upon the new distressing event arising from Mr. A. Gebhard*'s fanciful accusation? For the matter of that, dozens of events of a far more distressing character, each of them calculated to crush the hapless woman chosen as victim, are ripe and ready to burst over her head, wounding as badly the society. Again, I should have imagined that, after my signal failure to satisfy your rigorous logicians in the Billing Massey and Kittle Light incidents, my personal opinions and explanations were held in small honor at the West. You seem, however, to think with Hwanel that every failure is a step to success, and your confidence in me must alarm seriously your friends. With your permission, I have left the explanation of the distressing incidents to Mad B herself. As she wrote to you, however, only simple truth, there is very little chance for her of being believed, save perhaps, by her few immediate friends if she has any left by the time this reaches you. You must have understood by this time, my friend, that the continual attempt made by us to open the eyes of the blind world has nearly failed, in India partially, in Europe carried with a few exceptions absolutely. There is but one chance of salvation for those who still believe, to rally together and face the storm bravely. Let the eyes of the most intellectual among the public be opened to the foul conspiracy against theosophy that is going on in the missionary circles, and in 1 year's time you will have gained your footing. In India it is, either Christ or the founders. Let us stone them to death. They have nearly finished killing one, they are now attacking the other victim Alcott. The Padres are as busy as bees. The PRS has given them an excellent opportunity of making capital of their ambassador. Mr. Hodgson fell quite easily a victim to false evidence, and the scientific a priori impossibility of such phenomena helping the reality of the phenomena he was sent to investigate and report upon is utterly and totally discredited. He may plead as an excuse the personal disappointment he felt, which made him turn in a fury against the alleged authors of the gigantic swindle, but there is no doubt that if the society collapses it will be due to him. We may add that the praiseworthy efforts of our mutual friend of Simla, A.O. Hume, who has not, however, resigned, and those of Mr. Lane Fox. What society could withstand in its integrality the effects of two such tongues as those of Messrs. H and L. F. While the former, taking into his confidence every theosophist of note, assures him that since the beginning of the society not one of the letters alleged to have come from the masters was genuine, Mr. L. Fox goes about preaching that he is only carrying out the wishes of the master, M. in acquainting the theosophists with all the defects of the TS. and the mistakes of its founders, whose karma it is to betray the sacred trust they had received from their gurus. After this you will, perhaps, blame Les Archelaus for detesting the Europeans at HQ, and saying that it is they who have ruined the society. Thus, my friend, there comes a forcible end to the projected occult instructions. Everything was settled and prepared. The secret committee, appointed to receive our letters and teachings and to convey them to the Oriental group, was ready, when a few Europeans, for reasons I prefer not mentioning, took upon themselves the authority of reversing the decision of the whole council. They declined, though the reason they gave was another one, to receive our instructions through Subbaro and Damodar, the latter of whom is hated by Messrs. L. Fox and Hartman. Subba resigned and Damodar went to Tibet. Are our Hindus to be blamed for this? And now, Hume and Hodgson have goaded Subbaro to fury by telling him, that as a friend and fellow occultist of Madame B.S. he was suspected by the government of being also a spy. It is the history of the Count St. Germain, and Cagliostro told over again. But I may tell to you, who have ever been faithful and true to me, that the fruits of your devotion shall not be allowed to decay and crumble down into dust from the tree of action. And now, may I not say a few words that may prove useful? It is an old truism that none of you have ever formed an accurate idea of either the masters or the laws of occultism they are guided by. For instance, I, because I had received a bit of Western education, must needs be fancied as the type of a gentleman who strictly conforms his action to the laws of etiquette and regulates his intercourse with Europeans, after the regulations of your world and society. Nothing could be more erroneous, the absurd picture of an Indo-Tibetan ascetic playing at Circe. Grandison need hardly be noticed. Nevertheless, H.A.B. Ing failed to answer to the said description. I was hung in effigy, and publicly branded and degraded, as mad. B would say. What a poor parody! When shall you realize that I am nothing of the kind? That if, to a certain extent, I may be familiar with your, to me, peculiar notions about the propriety of this thing or another, and the obligations of a Western gentleman, so are you, to a degree, acquainted with the manners and customs of China and Tibet. For all that, as you would decline to conform yourself to our habits and live according to our customs, so do I, preferring our modes of life to yours, and our ideas to those of the West. I am accused of plagiarism / we, of Tibet and China, know not what you mean by the word / do, but this is no reason, perhaps, why I should accept your literary laws. Any writer has the privilege of taking out whole sentences from the dictionary of Pai Huan Yanfu, the greatest in the world, full of quotations from every known writer, and containing all the phrases ever used, and to frame them to express his thought. This does not apply to the Kittle case, which happened just as I told you. But you may find, perchance throughout my letters, 20 detached sentences which may have been already used in books or MSS. When you write upon some subject, you surround yourself with books of references, etc. When we write upon something the Western opinion about which is unknown to us, we surround ourselves with hundreds of paras, upon this particular topic, from dozens of different works impressed upon the Akasa. What wonder then, that not only Aquila entrusted with the work and innocent of any knowledge of the meaning of plagiarism, but even myself should use occasionally a whole sentence already existent, applying it only to another, our own idea. I have told you of this before, and it is no fault of mine. If your friends and enemies will not remain satisfied with the explanation, when I shall undertake to write an original prize essay, I may be more careful. For the Kittle business, it is your own fault. Why have you printed The Occult World before sending it to me for revision? I would have never allowed the passage to pass, nor the asterisk lysing, either foolishly invented as half a nom de plume by Juelke, and carelessly allowed by me to take root without thinking of the consequences. We are not infallible, all foreseeing Mahatmas at every hour of the day, good friend. None of you have even learned to remember so much. And now for occultism. We were expected to allow the occult forces to be treated in the same manner as their rind physical forces in nature. We are taken to task for not giving out to every man of learning who had joined the TS the fruits of the researches of generations of occultists who had all devoted their lives to it, and who had as often lost them in the great struggle of wrenching her secrets from the heart of nature. Unless we did that, occultism would not be recognized. It has to remain within the limbo of magic and superstition, spiritualism in the sight of some, fraud in the opinion of others. Who thought for one instant that an occult law revealed ceased to be occult to become public property, unless it was given to an occultist who dies before he betrays the secret? What grumblings, what criticisms on Devachan and kindred subjects for their incompleteness and many a seeming contradiction! O blind fools! They forget or never knew that he who holds the keys to the secrets of death is possessed of the keys of life. That could everyone become a creative god in this race, acquiring knowledge so easily that there would be no necessity for a sixth and seventh races? And that we should have perverted the program of being, garbled the accounts in the book of life, defeated in a word the eternal will. My friend, I have little if anything more to say. I regret deeply my inability to satisfy the honest, sincere aspirations of a few chosen ones among your group, at least, for the present. Could but your LL understand, or so much as suspect, that the present crisis that is shaking the TS to its foundation is a question of perdition or salvation to thousands, a question of the progress of the human race or its retrogression, of its glory or dishonor, and for the majority of this race of being or not being, of annihilation. In fact, perchance many of you would look into the very root of evil, and instead of being guided by false appearances and scientific decisions, you would set to work and save the situation by disclosing the dishonorable doings of your missionary world. Meanwhile, accept my best wishes. KH. I believe I had better tell you once more what I would have you remember always. I should be glad if every question could be answered as easily as your query about the distressing event. Why is it that doubts and foul suspicions seem to beset every aspirant for Kilaship? My friend, in the Masonic lodges of old times the neophyte was subjected to a series of frightful tests of his constancy, courage, and presence of mind. By psychological impressions supplemented by machinery and chemicals, he was made to believe himself falling down precipices, crushed by rocks, walking spider-web bridges in mid-air, passing through fire, drowned in water, and attacked by wild beasts. This was a reminiscence of and a program borrowed from the Egyptian mysteries. The West, having lost the secrets of the East, had, as I say, to resort to artifice. But in these days the vulgarization of science has rendered such trifling tests obsolete. The aspirant is now assailed entirely on the psychological side of his nature. His course of testing in Europe and India is that of Rajyog, and its result is as frequently explained to develop every germ good and bad in him in his temperament. The rule is inflexible, and not one escapes whether he but writes to us a letter, or in the privacy of his own heart's thought formulates a strong desire for occult communication and knowledge. As the shower cannot fructify the rock, so the occult teaching has no effect upon the unreceptive mind, and as the water develops the heat of caustic lime, so does the teaching bring into fierce action every unsuspected potentiality latent in him. Few Europeans have stood this test. Suspicion followed by self-woven conviction of fraud seems to have become the order of the day. I tell you, with a very few exceptions, we have failed in Europe. Henceforth, the policy of absolute neutrality of the TS in occult teachings and phenomena will be rigidly enforced. Whatever is imparted will be to individual members from individuals. For inst, if mad B finds the necessary strength to live, and this depends entirely on her will and its powers of exertion, and is willing under the guidance of her guru or even myself to serve us as an amanuensis for you, sin it not for the group, she can, if she likes, send you weekly or monthly instructions. Mohini could do the same, but under the pledge that neither our names, or that of the sender, will be ever made public, nor shall the TS be made responsible for these teachings. If the Oriental group survives, something could be yet done for it. But never, henceforth, shall the society in India be allowed to be compromised again by phenomena that are denounced wholesale as fraud. The good ship is sinking, friend. Because its precious cargo has been offered to the public at large, because some of its contents have been desecrated by profane handling and its gold received as brass. Henceforth, I say, no such profane eye will see its treasures, and its outer decks and rigging must be cleansed of the impurity and dross that was accumulated on them by the indiscretion of its own members. Try to remedy the evil done. Every step made by one in our direction will force us to make one toward him. But it is not by going to Ladakh that one shall find us, as Mr. Lane Fox imagines. Once more, accept my blessing and parting greeting if they have to be my last. KH letter no. LXV I received London, October. Loth, 1884. For reasons perfectly valid though not necessary for me to enter into in detail, I could neither answer your letter at Elberfeld, nor transmit it to you through L.Ch. Since it has become impossible to utilize the main channel HPB, through which I have hitherto reached you, because of your personal and mutual relations with her, I employed the common PKST. Even this required more expenditure of power from a friend than you can imagine. It would not be the part of a friend to withhold the truth when the speaking of it can do good, so I must tell you that you ought to put a close watch upon yourself, if you would not put an end forever to my letters. Insensibly to yourself you are encouraging a tendency to dogmatism and unjust misconception of persons and motives. I am well aware of your ideas up beyond that which you call the goody-goody absurdity, and I feel as painfully confident that since in your world no one is allowed to moralize the other and that you are very likely to resent it, these words are probably written in vain. But I also know your sincere desire that our correspondence should not be broken, and knowing this, I point out to your notice that which is certain to have that result. Beware then, of an uncharitable spirit, for it will rise up like a hungry wolf in your path, and devour the better qualities of your nature which have been springing into life. Broaden instead of narrowing your sympathies, try to identify yourself with your fellows, rather than to contract your circle of affinity. However, caused whether by faults at Udyar or Allahabad, or by way of negligence, or H.P.B's viciousness, a crisis is here, and it is the time for the utmost practicable expansion of your moral power. It is not the moment for reproaches or vindictive recriminations, but for united struggle. Whomsoever has sown the seeds of the present tempest, the whirlwind is strong, the whole society is reaping it, and it is rather fanned than weakened from chigads. You laugh at probation, the word seems ridiculous as applied to you. You forget that he who approaches our precincts even in thought, is drawn into the vortex of probation. At any rate your temple totters, and unless you put your strong shoulders against its wall you may share the fate of Samson. Pride and dignified contempt will not help you in the present difficulties. There is such a thing when understood allegorically as treasures guarded by faithful gnomes and fiends. The treasure is our occult knowledge that many of you are after, you foremost of all, and it may not be HPB or Alcott or anyone else individually who have awakened the guardians thereof, but yourself, more than they and the society collectively. Such books as The Occult World and Estorictidism do not pass unnoticed under the eyes of those faithful guardians, and it is absolutely necessary that those who would have that knowledge should be thoroughly tried and tested. Infer from this what you will, but remember that my brother and I are the only among the brotherhood who have at heart the dissemination, to a certain limit, of our doctrine, and HPB was hitherto our sole machinery, our most docile agent. Granting that she is all you describe her, and I have already told you that the rickety old body becomes sometimes positively dangerous, still it does not excuse in you the smallest relaxation of effort to save the situation and push on the work, and especially protect our correspondence, all the faster. Deem it, what it is, a positive advantage to the rest of you that she should have been what she is, since it has thrown upon you the greater stimulus to accomplish in spite of the difficulties you believe she has created. I do not say we should have preferred her had a more tractable agent been available, still, so far as yourselves are concerned it has been an advantage, yet you have alienated her for a long time if not forever, and thereby thrown tremendous difficulties in my way. Remember what I said to you some 2 years ago were HPB. To die before we found a substitute. The powers through which we work in our communications with the outside world may permit the transmission of 2 or 3 letters more, then it would die out and you would have no more letters from me. Well, she is virtually dead, and it is yourself, pardon me, this one more truth, who have killed the rude but faithful agent, one moreover who was really devoted to you personally. Let us drop the subject if it is distasteful to you. I have done my best to stop the evil, but I have neither jurisdiction or control over her, nor shall I have any better chance with Mrs. H. She is a magnificent subject naturally, but so distrustful of herself and others, so apt to take the real for hallucination and vice versa, that it will require a long time before she becomes thoroughly controllable even by herself. She is far, far from being ready, moreover she understands neither herself, nor us. Verily our ways are not your ways, hence there remains but little hope for us in the West. Do not, I pray you, attribute the above to any influence from HPB. She has doubtless complained bitterly to her master and says so openly, but this does not alter his opinion nor affect my own attitude towards you in the least. Not alone we two, but even she knows how important to the society's welfare are your services, and no personal grievance of hers would be allowed to stand in the way of your receiving strict justice, or to prevent our according it to her either. Her master and I directed her to do and say all that she did concerning Mrs. H. Any unpleasantness resulting, was due to the execution of her orders. We had found Mrs. H. in America, we impressed her to prepare for the writing of the book she has produced with the aid of Mohini. Had she consented to stop at Paris, as requested, a few days longer and come over to England with HPB. The later complication could have been averted. The effect of her coming to your house has been described to you by her before, and in resenting what Mohini and HPB were saying to you and MRS. You have been simply resenting our personal wishes. You will resent my words even now when I tell you that you have been unconsciously, I agree in my way, in her development. Yet you would have been the first one to profit thereby. But not understanding our ways and the occult methods, you insisted upon knowing the cause and reason for everything done, especially things that did not suit you. You even demanded that the reason why you have been asked to come to Elberfield should be thoroughly explained to you. This is unreasonable from the occult point of view, good friend. You either trust in me, or do not. And I must frankly tell you that my friendly regard suffered a shock from the hearing of your ultimatum, which may be condensed thus: either MRS. passes a week or so at our house, or you, leave the LL. to get on as best it can. It almost meant this: masters or no masters, to the contrary notwithstanding, I must and shall show the LL. that anything they may have heard about this affair was false, and that the masters would never consent to any action hurtful to my pride, that must be protected in any event. My friend, this is treading upon dangerous ground. In our mountains here, the Dugpas lay at dangerous points, in paths frequented by archelaus, bits of old rag, and other articles best calculated to attract the attention of the unwary, which have been impregnated with their evil magnetism. If one be stepped upon, a tremendous psychic shock may be communicated to the wayfarer, so that he may lose his footing and fall down the precipice before he can recover himself. Friend, beware of pride and egoism, two of the worst snares for the feet of him who aspires to climb the high paths of knowledge and spirituality. You have opened a joint of your armor for the Dugpas. Do not complain if they have found it out and wounded you there. MRS. did not really want to go to your house, for, as she said to you very truthfully, I had told her not to do so for reasons that you must know yourself by this time. You also should have known, that if we were worth anything in our individuality, and not mere powerless puppets, we were not to be influenced by HPB, nor driven by threats to do anything contrary to our light and the necessities of karma. I am sorry that you did not recall these facts before speaking, as this makes my position still more embarrassing before my chief, who, of course, has had the ultimatum put on record. You deny having ever applied to be accepted as a Kila. My friend, with such failings smoldering in your heart, you could not be even a lay Kila. But once more I say, let us drop the subject. Words will not obliterate deeds, and what is done is done. My brother M., who has more authority than I, has just written the promised letter to the inner circle. Your honor, good friend, is saved. At what price? Read and you shall see. You do not find certain recent letters and notes of mine, including the one to the treasurer of the LL. Philosophical and in my usual style. It could scarcely be helped, I wrote but on the business of the moment, as I am doing now, and had no time for philosophy. With the LL. and most of the other Western branches of the TS. In a deplorable state, philosophy may be invoked to restrain one's impatience, but the chief thing called for at present, is some practical scheme for dealing with the situation. Some, most unjustly, try to make HSO and HPB solely responsible for the state of things. Those two are, say, far from perfect in some respects, quite the opposite. But they have that in them, pardon the eternal repetition, but it is being as constantly overlooked, which we have but too rarely found elsewhere. Unselfishness, and an eager readiness for self-sacrifice for the good of others. What a multitude of sins does not this cover? It is but a truism, yet I say it, that in adversity alone can we discover the real man. It is a true manhood when one boldly accepts one's share of the collective karma of the group one works with, and does not permit oneself to be embittered, and to see others in blacker colors than reality, or to throw all blame upon some one black sheep, a victim, specially selected. Such a true man as that we will ever protect, and despite his short combings, assist to develop the good he has in him. Such an one is sublimely unselfish, he sinks his personality in his cause, and takes no heed of discomforts or personal obloquy unjustly fastened upon him. I have done, my good friend, and have nothing more to say. You have too much intelligence not to see clearly, as the Americans would say, the fix/am in, and that I, personally, can do very little. The present situation, as you will find from M's letter, has been gradually created by all of you as much as by the wretched founder. Yet without at least one of them we can hardly do, for several years more to come. You have treated the old body too cruelly, and it now has its day. You will never agree in this fully w4th me, but it is a fact, nevertheless. All I can do for you personally, I will do it, unless you make the situation still worse by not changing your policy. One who would have higher instruction given to him has to be a true theosophist, in heart and soul, not merely in appearance. Meanwhile, receive my poor blessing. LHPH letter no. LXMII_H written to Colonel Alcott. You have been ordered home for a rest that you need, so you should decline any further dealings until you hear from M. The Mahakohan will intimate when you are to go to the Punjab. As the English mail goes tomorrow, you might do as well to give Mr. Sinnott a friendly caution against being surprised if his paper project should have checks upon checks. The state of India is just now almost comparable to a great body of dry matter in which sparks are smouldering. Agitators of both races have been and are doing their best to stir up a great flame. In the mad fanaticism of the hour there is hardly patience enough to think soberly upon any matter, least of all one that appears like this to conservative men. Capitalists are more ready, like Holkar, to hoard away their rupees than put them into share companies. So miracles being barred from the first, as you say, and Mr. Sinnott, no, I see delays, disappointments, trials of patience, but, as yet, no failure. The lamentable issue of Bishanlal's rapid scramble up the Himalayas as would-be Keela has sadly complicated matters. And your eminent Simla correspondent has made matters worse. Though unaware of it, he has helped precipitate Bishanlal's insanity and, here, consciously, is plotting and scheming in many ways to make us all into a holocaust from out whose vapours may loom the giant spectre of the Jocko. Already he tells you that Sinnott is a credulous imbecile to be led by the nose. Pardon, my worthy friend, the bad taste which compelled me to duplicate for my *war day. P. Sinnott that last long letter of Mr. H. to yourself, which you have at the bottom of your dispatch box and did not intend HPB to see in full. I had it neatly copied, and for your fiery colleague he has had a deadly mine long prepared. Mr. Sinnott is now able to verify my old warning that he meant to set all your friends in London against the Society. The turn of the Kingsford Maitland party has come. The diabolical malice which breathes through his present letter comes straight from Dugpas, who provoke his vanity and blind his reason. When you open M's letter of 1881 you will find the key to many mysteries, this included. Intuitive as you naturally are, Keelaship is yet almost a complete puzzle for you, as for my friend Sinnott and the others, they have scarcely an inkling of it yet. Why must I even now, to put your thoughts in the right channel, remind you of the 3 cases of insanity within 7 months among *Lachelis, not to mention one's turning a thief? Mr. Sinnott may consider himself lucky that his lay Keelaship is in fragments only, and that I have so uniformly discouraged his desires for a closer relationship as an accepted Keela. Few men know their inherent capacities, only the ordeal of crude Keelaship develops them. Remember these words, they have a deep meaning. M sends you through me these vases as a home greeting. You had better say plainly to Mr. Sinnott that his quondam friend of Simla has no matter under what influence distinctly injured the newspaper project, not only with the Maharaja of Kashmir but with many more in India. all he hints at in his letter to you and more he has done or is preparing to do. This is a KH letter, and you may say to Mr. S from K. H letter no. Lksui, I have just taken your note from where it was placed by her, as, although I might take cognizance of its contents otherwise, you will prefer that the paper itself should pass into my own hand. Does it seem to you a small thing that the past year has been spent only in your family duties? Nay, but what better cause for reward, what better discipline, than the daily and hourly performance of duty? Believe me, my pupil, the man or woman who is placed by karma in the midst of small plain duties and sacrifices and loving kindness, will through these faithfully fulfilled rise to the larger measure of duty, sacrifice, and charity to all humanity. What better paths towards the enlightenment you are striving after than the daily conquest of self, the perseverance in spite of want of visible psychic progress, the bearing of ill fortune with that serene fortitude which turns it to spiritual advantage, since good and evil are not to be measured by events on the lower or physical plane. Be not discouraged that your practice falls below your aspirations, yet be not content with admitting this, since you clearly recognize that your tendency is too often towards mental and moral indolence, rather inclining to drift with the currents of life, than to steer a direct course of your own. Your spiritual progress is far greater than you know or can realize, and you do well to believe that such development is in itself more important than its realization by your physical plane consciousness. I will not now enter into other subjects, since this is but a line of sympathetic recognition of your efforts, and of earnest encouragement to hold a calm and brave spirit toward outward events in the present, and a hopeful spirit for the future on all planes. Truly yours, K. H. I am sincerely pleased, my pupil, that you should write to me as agreed, whether you have or have not any special question to put to me. It is impossible under your present health conditions that you should bring back to your physical brain the consciousness of her planes of existence, yet remember, that the sense of magnetic refreshment is no true measure of spiritual benefit, and you may even attain greater spiritual progress while your psychic development appears to stand still. Now to answer your questions. In esoteric teachings Brahma, Pitri, and Devalokas, are states of consciousness belonging to the various ethereal hierarchies or classes of Dhyanis and Pitris, the creators and ancestors of humanity, and of Devas, some far higher than man, spiritually, some among the Deva classes far behind on the descending arc of evolution, and only destined to reach the human stage in a future Manvantara. Esoterically, these lokas represent nirvana, Devachan, and the astral world. The meaning of the terms Devachan and Devaloka is identical, Chan and Loka equally signifying place or abode. Deva is a word too indiscriminately used in Eastern writings, and is at times merely a blind. 2. You will be right in referring the real knowledge and true cause of the verses quoted to the highest plane of spiritual enlightenment, the greater darkness into which the perfected Siddha is finally merged thereby, is that absolute darkness Y which is absolute light. The real knowledge here spoken of is not a mental but a spiritual state, implying full union between the knower and the known. I hope that these brief replies may throw all the light you needed upon these points. With sincere goodwill, yours truly, K. H. Letter No. LXX. You will have learned ere now, my friend, that I was not deaf to your appeal to me, although I was unable to answer it as you and I too could have wished, by lifting for a moment the ever thinning veil between us. When? Do you ask me? I can but reply, not yet. Your probation is not ended. Patience a little longer. Meanwhile you know the path to travel, it lies plainly before you for the present, though the choice of an easier if longer way may await you in the distant future. Farewell, my brother. Ever your in sympathy, K. H. Very kind Sinat Sahib. Many thanks and salams for the tobacco machine. Our Frenchified and Pelaying Jazed Pundit tells me the little short thing has to be collated, whatever he may mean by this, and so I will proceed to do so. The pipe is short and my nose long dash, so we will agree very well together, I hope. Thanks. Many thanks. The situation is more serious than you may imagine, and we will want our best forces and hands to work at pushing away bad luck. But are Kohen willing and you helping, we will scramble out somehow or another. There are clouds which are below your horizon, and kh is right. The storm is threatening. Could you but go to Bombay to the anniversary? You would confer upon kh and myself a great obligation, a lasting one, but that you know best. This meeting will be either the triumph or the downfall of the society and a gulf. You are wrong too about the Pelaying Sahib. He is as dangerous as a friend as an enemy, very very bad. As both I know him best. Anyhow, you Sinat Sahib reconciled me to a good many things. You are true, and true I will be. Yours always, M. Letter No. See, my good brother the little doctor and the Kila Mohini will explain to you the object of their visit and a serious conference which I believe necessary. The objections of last year are creeping out also. You have a letter from me in which I explain why we never guide our chelas, the most advanced even, nor do we forewarn them, leaving the effects produced by causes of their own creation to teach them better experience. Please bear in mind that particular letter. Before the cycle ends, every misconception ought to be swept away. I trust in and rely upon you to clear them entirely in the minds of the Prague fellows. They are a troublesome lot, especially Adityaram, who influences the whole group. But what they say of last night is right. You were a little bit too much carried away with your enthusiasm for occultism and mixed it up very imprudently with universal brotherhood. They will explain to you all. Yours K. H. I. Probation, and Kilaship 375. Letter Knowles Z8th Mr. Sinat. You will receive a long letter posted Sunday at Bombay from the Brahmin boy. Kudhumi went to see him, as he is his Kila, before going into Tongpa Ngi, the state in which he now is, and left with him certain orders. The boy has a little bungled up the message, so be very careful before you show it to Mr. Hume, lest he should again misunderstand my brother's real meaning. I will not stand any more nonsense, or bad feeling against him, but retire at once. We do the best we can. J. Letter No. Lsiv. You are so anxious to find out the particular spot where I erased and precipitated instead another sentence last night at post office. I can satisfy your curiosity, Mr. Sinat. But that it was the Kohen's knowledge that neither you nor anyone cared for the real object of the society, nor had any respect for the brotherhood, but only a personal feeling for a few of the brothers. So you cared only for kh. Personally and phenomena, Mr. Hume, to get at the secrets of their philosophy and to assure himself that the Tibetan Mahatmas, the Lhazif, at all existing outside of Madame B.'s imagination, were connected anyway with certain adepts he had in his mind. All this is what kh. said, what I had to write and precipitate instead of that which stood then written by the boy in a phraseology which would have called out from Mr. Hume a whole torrent of fine words, and the word ignorance applied to my brother. I would not have even the desert wind listen to a word said at low breath against him who now sleeps. Such is the cause of the tamaka produced by me, and for no other cause. Yours J. Letter No. LXXV. The right is on her side. Your accusations are extremely unjust, and coming from you pain me the more. If after this distinct statement you still maintain the same attitude, I shall have to express my deep regret at this new failure of ours, and wish you, with all my heart, better success with more worthy teachers. She certainly lacks charity, but indeed, you lack discrimination. Regretfully yours. Kila Training. Poor Subbaro is in a fix, that is why he does not answer you. On one hand he has the indomitable HPB, who plagues Maurya's life to reward you, and himself, who would if he could gratify your aspirations. On the other he encounters the unpassable Chinese wall of rules and law. Believe me, good friend, learn what you can under the circumstances, to viz. the philosophy of the phenomena and our doctrines on cosmogony, inner man, etc. This Subbaro will help you to learn, though his terms, he being an initiated Brahmin and holding to the Brahmanical esoteric teaching, will be different from those of the Arhat Buddhist terminology. But essentially both are the same, identical in fact. My heart melts when I read Mr. Hume's sincere noble letter, especially what I perceive between the lines. Yes, to one from his standpoint our policy must seem selfish and cruel. I wish I were the master. In 5 or 6 years I hope to become my own guide, and things will have somewhat to change then. But even Caesar in irons cannot shuffle off the irons and transfer them to Hippo or Thraso the turnkey. Let us wait. I cannot think of Mr. Hume without remembering each time an allegory of my own country, the genius of pride watching over a treasure, an inexhaustible wealth of every human virtue, the divine gift of Brahma to man. The genius has fallen asleep over its treasure now, and one by one the virtues are peeping out. Will he awake before they are all freed from their lifelong bonds? That is the question. H1 The beginning of this letter is missing, ed. Section 4 I caret comma dot underscore caret. Caret foot of India caret K caret letter no. Lsxi I caret 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 if received March, 18s3. Caret B pray, convey to Col. Gordon the expression of my sympathy, happy face, and friendly esteem. He is indeed a loyal friend and a trustworthy ally. Tell him that with every allowance for the motives given and his own quiet modesty I yet believe he may yet do much good in his own unassuming way. A Howrah branch is really needed and he alone can create the nucleus. Why not try? He cares not for the service and is ready at any moment to throw it up. But this is unnecessary so long as it lasts and gives him a strength and authority with some native members which otherwise he would not have. At any rate then he is going to be taken to Simla and will have plenty of nothing to do time. Why not use his opportunities for putting the eclectic and Himalayan in order, of course in his official capacity as a member of council and vice president of the eclectic. I will have Alcott send him an official paper to that effect and write instructions for him myself. I am anxious to remove the Anglo-Indian eclectic to Calcutta, and have its headquarters, though it be nominal for a while, announced through the journal hitherto as established in the capital, the native members of the eclectic incorporated in the Himalayan and Apara, inserted to notify all those who would join the Anglo-Indian branch that in your absence they old have to address themselves to Col. W. Gordon acting president in your place. Some are born for diplomacy and intrigue. I rather think that it is not my particular province. Withal, I believe the arrangement calculated to impede the disastrous effects of Mr. Hume's intrigue and his endeavors to have the society, eclectic, dead and buried, thus showing those concerned with it, that he was its creator and preserver, and that his retirement was its death knell. Thanks for Col. G.'s letter. The 30th is as good as any other day after the 27th. No, a branch at Madras is not absolutely necessary from the very starting. But it does stand to reason that if it is Madras that is to furnish the largest share of the funds, that it would also have the preference after Calcutta. So long as the money is not in, it is useless to fix any date. Our paper once established, I will never concern myself any more with any worldly enterprise. Yes, I have worry and annoyance indeed, but then it had to be expected, and no fish undertaking a ramble on the river's bank and outside its own element need complain of catching a lumbago. We are near the end now one way or the other, and once I take my leap back into the crystal wave few will ever have a chance of seeing me peeping out again. Mankind are not always what they seem, and I have lost much of my optimism in the late affray. Mankind was somewhere named the poetry of creation and woman the poetry of earth. When she is not an angel she must be a fury. It is in the latter capacity that I have ever met her on my way when Rajas and Zemindars were quite ready to disperse the necessary funds. Well, the affray is still raging and we may yet win brilliantly the day. Yours truly, K. H. Letter No. Lsxiate my dear friend, do not accuse me after having started it myself of indifference to, or oblivion of, our little speculation. the Kohen is not to be consulted every day on such worldly matters, and that is my excuse for the unavoidable delay. And now, I am permitted by my venerated chief to convey to you a memorandum of his views and ideas upon the fortune and destinies of a certain paper upon which his foresight was asked by your humble friend and his servant. Putting them into business shape, I have noted his views as follows. The establishment of a new journal of the kind described is desirable, and very feasible with proper effort. 2. That effort must be made by your friends in the world, and every Hindu theosophist who has the good of his country at heart, and not very afraid to spend energy and his time. It has to be made by outsiders, i.e., those who do not belong to our order irretrievably, as for ourselves. 3. We can direct and guide their efforts and the movement, in general. Though separated from your world of action, we are not yet entirely severed from it so long as the Theosophical Society exists. Hence, while we cannot inaugurate it publicly and to the knowledge of all theosophists and those concerned, we may, and will so far as practicable, aid the enterprise. In fact, we have begun already to do so. Moreover, we are permitted to reward those who will have helped the most effectually to realize this grand idea, which promises in the end to change the destiny of a whole nation, if conducted by one like yourself. For in proposing to capitalists, especially to natives, the risk, as they are likely to think, of so large a sum, special inducements should be held out to them. Therefore, we are of opinion that you should ask no more compensation than you now receive, until your exertions have made the journal a decided success, something that must and shall happen, if I am good for anything. For a certain time, then, it is desirable that the affair should be stripped in the eyes of the future shareholders of every objection. Able feature. Capital may now be invested in various ways so as to secure moderate interest with little or no risk. But for the ordinary speculator, there is much risk in founding a new journal of high cost, which is to favor the side of just native interests in those too frequent cases of injustice, which can hardly be proven to you under ordinary circumstances, but that will, which always occur when a country is held by foreign conquerors. Cases which, as regards India, tend to multiply with the gradual entrance of officials of a lower social origin under the competitive system of appointment, and increased friction due to a selfish resentment of the admission of natives to civil service. To your capitalists, therefore, you should hold out the inducement that you will unselfishly labor, for the same emolument as at your disposal now, to make their venture more than ordinarily profitable, and only claim a share of profits as delineated by yourself, with a slight change when that point will be reached. I am ready to offer myself as a guarantee that it speedily will. My suggestion is therefore, agreeably with the Kohen's opinion, that you should offer to accept the consolidated monthly pay you mention, with the usual and necessary personal expenses of travel when on business for the journal, until the capital shall be earning 8% of the profits. Between 8 and 12% you should have the quarter share. Of all above 12% or 1/2 share. 6. You should have certainly entire control over the journal, with some reassuring provisos that power should not be transferable to a successor without the consent of a majority of the capital represented in the ownership, and that it should cease when it became apparent that the journal was being used against the interests to promote which it was founded. Without some such reservation, my venerable Kohen, and we too, think that deep-seated prejudices and suspicions would cause native capitalists, especially the Rajas, to hesitate, not for fear to make the large risks of this undertaking, but owing to doubts as to its success. The whole Anglo-European community now suffers in native opinion for the commercial sins of dishonest houses who have heretofore broken faith with the capitalists, and there are several Rajas, who now follow in pensive gloom the far distant form of Sir Ashley Eaton, who walks off with one pocket full of never fulfilled promises and the other loaded with the remembrance of several lakhs of rupees borrowed from and never returned to his friends the Rajas. At the same time, these provisos should be so framed as to protect your interests as well. Some offer on your part, Spontaneous of course, inviting the occasional inspection of books and papers at reasonable times for the verification of accounts rendered, should be given, since your personal integrity cannot be guaranteed for all your servants. But this is not to diminish your authority over the management of the journal in all departments. 7. It is better that the whole capital should be paid in before the journal is begun, as it is always unpleasant and troublesome to call in assessments on top of original losses. But it should be provided that so much as was not immediately needed should be kept at interest, and that a sinking fund should be created out of the income of the journal, to provide for any unforeseen exigency. The surplus capital as well as the earnings, to be distributed from time to time. 8. The usual contracts and co-partnership papers might be executed from the beginning, but deposited in confidential hands mutually agreeable and their nature kept secret until the arrival of a certain specified contingency. This would show good faith on both sides and inspire confidence. 9. No remark upon the other features of your program seems called for. Therefore to something else now. 2 or 3 nights ago, the following conversation, or rather, profession of independent opinion was listened to by myself, and approved, as far as wordly reasoning goes. Alcott was talking with several influential theosophists concerned with, and interest in our future journalistic operations. Your colleague and brother the good and sincere Narendra Babu of the Mirror said wise words to this effect, of the several princes, whom M.R. Sinnott's friends have in view in India, probably not one would be influenced to subscribe the capital from patriotic motives. The Nizam wants the Birars, and is hoping that England will be as generous to him as she is to Setwayo. Holkar wants cent per cent or as nearly that as possible. Kashmir fears the sea. And M. Gazette and the cupidity that has long yearned to annex his rich province, to this, my conservative and patriotic friend APS is sure to demur. Benares is orthodox and would spend freely to abolish cow, not ox, killing. Baroda is a boy, with a colt's restiveness and no clear idea, as yet, about life. With proper agents and discreet negotiations, the 5 lakhs may be raised, but it cannot be said how soon. Right, there, especially he who has little if any faith in our helping them. HPB forwarded me since then your letter. In case my advice is asked, I should counsel, the keeping of your proprietors in suspense as to your actual chances, so as to give you the option of doing what may develop into the best thing. I, for one, confess to you now that I have 2 strings to my bow. When the new capital is raised, in case even it is so very soon, it will make no very great difference whether your paper be started next cold weather or the following, so long as you are at the head of the Pioneer. You would be at its helm until November, and meanwhile your friends would have time to manage their difficult and delicate negotiations, and provisions might be made for you to receive an equitable proportion of salary while perfecting your arrangements at home, to begin in the cold weather of 1884. On the other hand, if the capital could be secured shortly, you could put it at interest, and draw no pay until you leave the Pioneer. Of course, without forcing the events in violation OTR laws, save the Cohen's permission. All this is an uncertainty and a dilemma in some sort. Yet I can help your friends, and they will find it out very quick no sooner they begin. No, I would not promise, if I were you, not to start another paper, for, to begin with, you do not know what might turn up, and then it is always useful to have a sort of Damocles hanging over such heads as Radigans and Walkers. They are frightened to death, I tell you. They might even make it pleasant and profit able to you to continue directing the Pioneer, with increased editorial powers and salary. For this they could better afford than to have you compete with them with 5 lakhs at your back. As to the advisability of such a thing, time will show. As advised at present, I still hold to the original program. You must be calm, complete and sole master of a paper devoted to the interests of my benighted countrymen. The *Indo-British nation is the pulse I go by. More anon. I enclose a letter kindly lent to me without his knowledge, though * carried by the colonel. Our friend foams with rage in the most Unyagi-like manner, and Subaru is right in his opinions of him. Such letters and worse will be received by C.M., S.M. and others. And this is the man who swore his word of honor but the other day that he would never injure the society, whatever may be his opinion of us personally. The close of the cycle. Good friend, the very last efforts. Who will win the day? Of the Dugpas, under whose influence he has now placed himself altogether, whom he attracts in every way and manner, or but that will do. Yours sincerely, K. H. Since you did not deal exhaustively with the case in your previous note, I said only what I did, for I am no businessman. One used to mercantile affairs would doubtless have deduced the entire plan from even smaller fragments than you have. But now that you have opened out the question, I may say, holding at the same time my amateur opinion in very light esteem, that your scheme appears reasonable and just enough. Mr. Dare, no less than yourself, should be substantially rewarded for his valuable and devoted services. Your proposal that the alienated 4-1 2ths of shares shall not participate in profits until their respective owners have made the remaining 8 2ths yield fair remuneration to capital is a fair one to both parties. Whether you shall or shall not eventually issue a duplex or quadruplex journal, I still think that if practicable, the larger amount of capital should be sought after, for, when you are fully equipped for any emergency, you may deliberately adopt such plan as cool judgment and a calculation of all the chances may indicate as best. And now, before quitting my novel relation of a business advisor, I must repeat that while we will help the enterprise from first to last as fully as possible within our rules, the initiative must be taken by your friends and ought to be guided and sympathized with by yourself, and I will just tell you why. While the greatest good ought to result from the successful establishment of such a journal, the strict law of justice forbids us to do aught to lessen in the slightest degree the merit to which he who shall make the dream a reality will be entitled. Few are those who know their future or what is best for them. No doubt, life on the European continent and in England possesses charms lacked by poor, dull India. But the latter can, on the other hand, offer privileges and attractions undreamed of by the average mystic. I dare not say more, but, you are wrong, very, very wrong in consenting to stop here only for my sake. I, at least, do not feel myself selfish enough to accept the sacrifice, had I not known what I do. For your obliging compliance with our wishes that you should attend the anniversary celebration, accept our best thanks. The effects of your presence and speech will be greater and better than you can now conceive. And, like all good actions, they will bring abundant reward for yourself here and hereafter. Let it be a consolation to you that you helped in a positive degree to neutralize the evil influences which the enemies of truth had concentrated upon the society. The dead point of the revolving cycle is past, a new one begins for the Theosophical Society on the 17th of December. Watch and see. Ever your friend. M. Sun's impression convexing lens being not yet ground to a perfect surface, he puts the matter in a somewhat crooked shape. M. did not want him to say there was anything like a possibility of failure, but just the usual possibility of delay in every business transaction left with our countrymen alone, plus, the malevolent, or if you prefer eccentric, meddling of the Rothney Swedenborg and other artists in calamity. From all I know of the situation, and I claim to watch it as closely as I am permitted to, the chances are that the money will be raised by the end of March, but chance being a squinting jade, according to report the time of collection is not yet written in the memorandum book of fate. Much depends upon contingencies, but still more upon the Simla Yogi leaving us for a while alone. 3 lakhs of rupees have been just as good as lost, owing to a letter written by him to an editor at Calcutta with a delineation of our true character, Jesuits, sorcerers, a deceitful, selfish set, etc. And by that editor shown to a Raja, hitherto well disposed and ready to do the bidding of the Mahatma brothers of patriotism in this transaction there will be very little if any. I will send you in a day or two, facts which will show to you persons in their true light. Meanwhile if I advise your acting entirely upon your own judgment as to your departure, it is because of the false light in which nearly all our actions are viewed by the Europeans who are however indirectly concerned with us. I do not want to be misjudged by you even for one moment. But strange and crooked as our ways may appear at first sight, I hope you will never allow your European mind to get influenced by your Rothney friend. Well, more anon, yours ever faithfully, K. H. Letter No. Lsky received London about July, 1883. Private but not very confidential. I have, you observed, left for a separate private letter in case you should like to read the other to your British brethren and sisters, and to the last any reference to the prop case said new journal, about whose prospects Col. Gordon has written you so encouragingly. I scarcely knew until I had begun to watch the development of this effort to erect a bulwark for Indian interests, how deeply my poor people had sunk. As one who watches the signs of fluttering life beside a dying bed, and counts the feeble breaths to learn if there may still be room for hope, so we Aryan exiles in our snowy retreat have been attentive to this issue. Debarred from using any abnormal powers that might interfere with the nation's karma, yet by all lawful and normal means trying to stimulate the zeal of those who care for our regard, we have seen weeks grow into months without the object having been achieved. Success is nearer than ever before, yet still in doubt. The letter of Gwyndon Lai, which I shall ask Yopasika to send you, shows that there is progress. In a few days a meeting of native capitalists is to be held at Madras, which Mr. Alcott is to attend, and from which there may be fruits. He will see the Gaikwar at Baroda and Holkar at Indore, and do his best as he has already at Bir and in Bengal. There was never a time when the help of a man like yourself was more needed by India. We foresaw it, as you know, and patriotically tried to make your way easy for a speedy return. But, alas, that it must be confessed, the word patriotism has now scarcely any electric power over the Indian heart. The cradle land of arts and creeds swarms with unhappy beings, precariously provided for, and vexed by demagogues who have everything to gain by chicane and impudence. We knew all this in the mass, but not one of us Aryans had sounded the depths of the Indian question as we have of late. If it be permissible to symbolize things subjective by phenomena objective, I should say that to the psychic sight India seems covered with a stifling grey fog, a moral meteor, the odic emanation from her vicious social state. Here and there twinkles a point of light which mark a nature still somewhat spiritual, a person who aspires and struggles after the higher knowledge. If the beacon of Aryan occultism shall ever be kindled again, these scattered sparks must be combined to make its flame. And this is the task of the TS, this the pleasant part of its work in which we would so gladly assist, were we not impeded and thrown back by the would-be cellists themselves. I stepped outside our usual limits to aid your particular project from a conviction of its necessity and its potential usefulness. Having begun, I shall continue until the result is known. But in this ungenial experience of meddling in a business affair, I have ventured within the very breath of the world's furnace. I have suffered so much from the enforced insight at short distance into the moral and spiritual condition of my people, and been so shocked by this nearer view of the selfish baseness of human nature, the concomitant, always, of the passage of humanity through our stage of the evolutionary circuit, I have seen so distinctly the certainty that it cannot be helped that I shall henceforth abstain from any repetition of the unbearable experiment. Whether your PAP-ER should succeed or not, and if the latter, it will be due to yourself exclusively, to the unfortunate inspiration on the 17th, published in the Times. I shall have no more to do with the financial side of these worldly affairs, but confine myself to our prime duty of gaining knowledge and disseminating through all available channels such fragments as mankind in the mass may be ready to assimilate. I shall, of course, be interested in your journalistic career here if I am able to overcome and soothe the bitter feelings you have just awakened in those who confided in you most, by that unfortunate and untimely confession, honest as its object may have been, and you may always depend upon my practical sympathy, but the genius of Mr. Dare must preside in your counting room as your own in the editor's office. The great pain you have inflicted upon me, shows clearly that either I understand nothing in the fitness of political duties and therefore, could hardly hope to be a wise business and political control, or that the man whom I regard as a true friend, however honest and willing, will never rise above English prejudices and the sinful antipathy towards our race and color. Madam will tell you more. Though you do not ask me to deal with it afresh, yet I will say 2 words more about Mr. Massey's difficulty as regards the letter from our brother H, then in Scotland, sent him circuitously through Ski. Be just and charitable to a European at least. If Mr. Massey had declared to the English spiritualists that he was in communication with the brothers by occult means, he would have spoken the simple truth. For not only once but twice had he such occult relationship, once with his father's glove, sent him by M. through Ski, and again with the note in question, for the delivery of which the same practical agency was employed, though without an equal expenditure of power. His, you see, is one more example of the ease with which even a superior intellect may deceive itself in occult matters, by the maya of its own engendering. And, as regards the other case, may it not be noted, I am no barrister, and therefore I speak under reserve as a mitigating circumstance for the accused, that Mr. Massey is not even to this day sure that Dr. Billing did not intercept the Simpson letter to his wife, keep it to use against her at a fortunate time, and actually so use it in this instance. Or, even allowing the letter to have been delivered to the addressee, know what was the answer, if any, written? Has the idea struck your observant friend that, at that very time, there was a womanly carrot worse than that medium spite, far worse than the odium theologitum, between the Simpson and Hollis Billing, concerning their respective claims to the favors shown by Ski? That Mrs. Billing called the Ski of her friend Simpson a bogus spook, asterisk that Dr. Billing complained bitterly to Alcott and H.P.B. of the fraud perpetrated by the Simpson, who tried to palm off a false Ski as the genuine one, the oldest as the most faithful control of his wife. The row got even into the papers. Strange, that at the time when she was publicly reproached by Mrs. B with pretending to be controlled by her Ski, Mrs. S should have asked her for such a delicate and dangerous service. I say again, I speak under reserve. I have never looked into the accusation seriously, and know of it by having caught a glimpse of the situation in Alcott's head when reading Mr. C.C. M.'s letter. But the hint may, perchance, be of some service. But this I do know, and say, the long and short of the matter is, that your friend has hastily suspected and unjustly condemned the innocent and done himself harm spiritually. He really has no right to accuse even H.P.B. of deliberate deceit. I protest most emphatically against the woman being dealt with so uncharitably. She had no intention to deceive, unless withholding a fact be a direct deceit and lie. On the theory suppressio veri, suggestis falsi, a legal maxim which she knows nothing about. But then on this theory we all, brothers and cellists, ought to be regarded as liars. She was ordered to see that the letter should be delivered. She had no other means of doing so at that time but through Ski. She had no power of sending it direct, as was the glove. M. would not help her, for certain reasons of his, and very weighty too, as I have found out later. She knew Mr. C.C. M. distrusted Ski, and was foolish enough to believe that Mr. Massey separated the medium from the spirit, as proved by her letter. She was anxious, out of pure and unselfish devotion for him, that he should see that he was noticed at last by a real brother. Hence she tried to conceal the fact that Ski had a hand in it. Moreover, an hour after having sent her letter to Mrs. B to be delivered by Ski, A letter read at the time not found accidentally as alleged. She forgot all about it as she forgets everything. No idea, no thought of the slightest deceit on her part had ever crossed her mind. Had Mr. Massey asked her to tell him honestly the truth. After the letter had been shown to him, she would have probably, either sent him to a very hot place, and said nothing, or honestly confessed the truth. She simply thought it best that the intended good effect of the brother's message should not be cancelled by arousing in Mr. M's mind a hostile disposition, the fruits of such unwarranted suspicion. We, my dear sirs, always judge men by their motives and the moral effects of their actions. For the world's false standards and prejudice we have no respect. Strictly confidential. The *Court d'Arabelle has come. On your answer, consent or refusal, depends the resurrection of the phoenix prostrate in a death-like samadhi, if not in actual death. If you believe in my word, and, leaving the riots to our care, are prepared for a somewhat unclean work from the European stand point though, and consent to oppose our work apparently, serving your ends in reality and thus saving our respective countries from a great evil that overhangs both, then consent to the proposal that will be made to you from India. You may work to all intents and purposes to oppose the Bengal Rent Bill, for do whatever you or others may, you will never be able to impede our work in the opposite direction. Therefore, one scruple less as one non-permitted confidence more. A riddle, verily. And now, good friend, I must explain. Only you have to prepare your European, cultured notions of right and wrong to receive a shock. A plan of action of a purely Asiatic character is laid bare before you, and since I may not move one finger, nor would I if I could in this case, to guide your understanding or feelings, it may be found too Jesuitical, to suit your taste. Alas for all! That you should be so little versed in the knowledge of occult antidotes as not to be able to perceive the difference between the Jesuitical tout chemin est bon qui many que Rome added to the cunning and crafty. The end justifies the means, and the necessity of the practical application of these sublime words of our Lord and Master, O ye Bhikkhus and Arhats. Be friendly to the race of men, our brothers. Know ye all, that he, who sacrifices not his one life to save the life of his fellow being, and he who hesitates to give up more than life, his fair name and honor, to save the fair name and honor of the many, is unworthy of the sin-destroying, immortal, transcendent nirvana. Well, it cannot be helped. Allow me to explain to you the situation. It is very complicated, but to him who, without any previous training, was able to assimilate so well some of our doctrines as to write esoteric Buddhism, the inner springs that we have to use ought to become intelligible. The beer chiefs propose 1.5 lakhs down for the phoenix, as much when they see you back to India, if the Bengal Rent Bill is opposed by the new paper and you promise to give them your support. Unless the proposition is accepted by you, we may prepare for the final incremation of our phoenix, and for good. Exclusive of this sum, Rs. 150,000 we can count but upon Rs. 45,000 in shares so far. But let the races put down cash and all will follow. 2. If you refuse, they will secure another editor. Were there any danger for the riots and the bill, they, the races or zemindars, would lose nothing thereby, except in the degree of cleverness of their editor, but they hope and are thoroughly unaware of being doomed in the long run. The only and real loser in the case of refusal will be India and your own country eventually. This is prophecy. 3. The resistance to, and the intrigues set on foot by the zemindars against the bill are infamous in their nature, yet very natural. Those who examine things at the core, perceive the real culprit in Lord Cornwallis and the long line of his successors. However it may be infamous, as I say, there it is and cannot be helped, for it is human nature itself, and there is no more dishonour to support their claims from a legal standpoint on the part of an editor, who knows them to be doomed, than there is for a counsel to defend his client, a great criminal sentenced to be hung. I am now trying to argue from your European standpoint for fear, and lest you should not be able to see things from our Asiatic point of view, or rather in the light we, who are Enabled to discern future events, see them. 4. A conservative editor whose field of action will be found to run on parallel lines with that of a conservative viceroy, will find himself having lost nothing in fact, for a slight opposition that cannot last long after all. There are great flaws in the present bill, examined from its legal, dead-letter aspect. 5. Owing to the idiotically untimely Ilbert's bill, and the still more idiotic Salagram-Shurandro contempt case, the agitation is carrying the population of India to the verge of self-destruction. You must not feel as though I were exaggerating if I say more. The English and especially Anglo-Indians are running the same course from an opposite direction. You are at liberty to refuse my warning, you will show yourself wise if you do not. To return to our direct object, 6. There are several Englishmen of great intellect and ability, who feel ready to defend, and even to ally themselves with, the Zemindars and oppose the bill, against their own principles and feelings simply because the races hate and oppose the man whom the rest of the Hindus profess, for the time being, to adore, and whom they are exalting with all the ardour of simple-minded, short-sighted savages. Thus the riots cannot escape their fate for a few months longer whether you accept the offer or not. In the latter case, of course the paper scheme is at an end. The Phoenix venture 389, 7. At the same time it is better that you should be prepared to know the unavoidable results. There are 99 chances against 1, that if the offer of the Zemindars is rejected, the Phoenix will ever come into existence, not so long at any rate as the present agitation is going on. And when it finally fails, as the project is bound to unless we become masters of the situation, then we will have to part. In order to obtain from the Kohan permission to defend the teeming millions of the poor and the oppressed in India, bringing on to bear all our knowledge and powers, I had to pledge myself, in case of the Phoenix's failure, to interfere no more with such worldly matters and to bid an eternal farewell to the European element. Angel Cole would have to take my place. On the other hand, should you consent to the offer, your opposition to the rent bill would have no more effect on our work for the riots than a straw to save a vessel from sinking, whereas, if another editor is selected, we would have no pretext to exercise our influence on their behalf. Such is the situation. It is a curious medley with no raison d'etre in your opinion. You can hardly be expected by us to see clearly through it at present, nor is there much likelihood that you will judge it fairly owing to this Egyptian darkness of cross purposes, nor is there any special need you should, if the offer has to fall to the ground. But, if your answer is favorable, I may perhaps as well add a few particulars. Know then, that opposition notwithstanding, and just because of it, you will bring the great national boil to a head sooner than it could be otherwise expected. Thus, while carrying out strictly your program and promise made to the races, you will be helping the events that have to be brought about to save the unfortunate population that has been sat upon ever since 1793, the year of Lord Cornwallis's great political mistake. At the same time you may be doing immense good in every other direction. Recall the past, and this will help you to see clearer into our intentions. When you took over Bengal from the native rulers, there were a number of men who exercised the calling of tax collectors under their government. These men received, as you are aware, a percentage for collecting the rents. The spirit of the letter of the tithe and tribute under the Mussulman rulers was never understood by the East India Company, least of all the rights of the riots to oppose an arbitrary interchange of the law of Wazifa and Muqassima. Well, when the Zemindars found that the British did not exactly understand their position, they took advantage of it as the English had taken advantage of their force. They claimed to be landlords. Weakly enough, you consented to recognize the claim, and admitting it notwithstanding the warning of the Mussulman who understood the real situation, and were not bribed as most of the company were, you played into the hands of the few against the many, the result being the perpetual settlement documents. It is this that led to every subsequent evil in Bengal. Seeing how the unfortunate riots are regarded by your proud nation in the full progress of the 19th century, being in your sight of far less value than a horse or cattle, it is not difficult to imagine how they were regarded by your countrymen then a century ago when every Englishman was a pious Christian at heart and ordered by the Bible to draw a distinction between the descendants of Ham and themselves, the heirs of the chosen people. The agreement drawn between Lord Cornwallis and the races which stipulated that the black human cattle should be treated by the Zemindars kindly and justly, and that they should not raise the rents of the ryots, etc., was a legal farce. The Kohen was then in India and he was an eyewitness to the beginning of horrors. No sooner had they secured the perpetual settlement agreement than the races began to disregard their engagements. Failing to fulfill any of these, they brought yearly ruin and starvation on the miserable ryots. They exacted tribute, sold them up, and trumped up false charges against them under the name of awab. These doors and openings led them wherever they wanted, and they levied for over 50 years most extraordinary taxes. All this the Zemindars have done and much more, and they will be surely made to account for it. Things too horrible to mention were done under the eyes and often with the sanction of the company's servants, when the mutiny put a certain impediment by bringing as its result another form of government. It is to redress the great wrong done, to remedy to the now irremediable, that Lord Ripon took it into his head to bring forward the new bill. It was not thought expedient by his councillors, not those you know of, to crush the Zemindari system without securing at the same time popularity among the majority in another direction, hence Ilbert's bill and some other trifles. We say then that to all appearances it is to redress the wrongs of the past, that is the object of the present Bengal Rent Bill. My friend, you are a remarkably clever editor and an astute and observant politician, and no one, perhaps, in all India goes as deep as you do into the inner constitution of the Anglo-Indian coup d'état. Still you do not go far enough, and the original primitive layers of the political soil as the genesis of some acts of my Lord Ripon were and are terra incognita to yourself as to so many others perhaps still older hands in politics than you are. Neither Lord Ripon nor his councillors, those behind the veil, anticipate any great results during his power in India. They are more occultists than you may imagine. Their liberal reforms are not meant for India, to the will or woes of which they arc. The Phoenix venture 391 quite indifferent, they look far off to future results and press acts, Ilbert's bills, Bengal Rent Bills and the rest are aimed at Protestant England, which, very soon, too soon if somebody or something does not interfere, will find itself suffocating in the invisible coils of the Romish friend and brother, the only one of your race whom I regard with a warm, sincere affection. Take care. Do not reject too lightly my warning, for it is a solemn one, and but a hint I am permitted to make. Political scepticism, like every other, scorns and laughs at the observations of those who do not belong to its factions. It finds out its mistakes when in a ditch. Beware, for it is no more a simple ditch, but an abyss that is being prepared for you. But let us see on what grounds an honest Englishman can oppose the Rent Bill. However great the misery of the riots even at present, however just the reprisals that are in store for the Zemindars, however human and generous, in short, on its surface the object of the Rent Bill, yet no honest government strictly speaking has the right to break at will and its own pleasure solemn pledges and engagements. Because, it is found that the races have not fulfilled their part of the agreement, it gives no right to the other party to make away with their signature and tear in shreds the perpetual settlement agreement. The sins of the few cannot well be visited upon the many. There are heavy flaws in the present Rent Bill as there were in the old system, and there is no clause in the old document stipulated to the effect that the settlement becomes nil at the will of the British. I will not enter upon the defects of the dead letter meaning in either the one or other, but will limit myself by telling you that there are such flaws and that, until modified, you have a perfect right to object to them. You are not expected to cause the bill to be withdrawn but to simply support the Zemindar's analysis of its defects. And this you can freely promise. However, I must not seem trying to influence you one way or the other. Some of the claims of the races are infamous and no honest man can be made to support them, while others are not without a strong legal foundation in their favor. The ruling power, for instance, was never yet and in no case the proprietor of the Khairiji land, not even under the Mussulman laws and sway. You have thus the spirit of Khairij and Oishar to work upon, in order to redeem your promise to the landowners and amuse them for a few months unto the day of the almighty smash that is in store for them. All that you are asked to do for the benefit of your as well as my country is, to overlook the ugly frontispiece of the edifice, taking into consideration only the real nature of the situation and the future good results, in case you should get over your very natural eye. This word is undecipherable. Ed. Squeamishness. In a few days you may receive a formal proposal. Think well over it. Do not allow yourself to be influenced by any consideration in connection with my desires. If you honestly believe the offer inconsistent with your European notions and criterion of truth and honor, refuse its acceptance without any hesitation, and let me bid you a sad though ever grateful and friendly farewell. I cannot expect to see you looking at things from my own standpoint. You look without, I see within. This is no hour for sentimentalities. The whole future of the brightest jewel, oh, what a dark satire in that name. In the crown of England is at stake, and I am bound to devote the whole of my powers as far as the Kohen will permit me to help my country at this 11th hour of her misery. I cannot work except with those who will work with us. Accuse me not, my friend, for you do not know, you cannot know, the extent of the limitations I am placed under. Think not, that I am seeking to place a bait, an inducement for you to accept that which would refuse under other circumstances, for I am not, having pledged my solemn word of honor to him to whom I am indebted for everything I am and know, I am simply helpless in case of your refusal, and we will have to part. Had not the rent bill been accompanied by the din and clash of the Ilbert bill and contempt case, I would have been the first to advise you to refuse. As the situation stands now, however, and prohibited as I am to use any but ordinary powers, I am powerless to do both, and am constrained to choose between helping my hapless mother country, and our future intercourse. It is for you to decide. And if this letter is fated to be my last, I beg you to remember for your sake, not mine, the message I sent at Simla to yourself and Mr. Hume through HPB. Lord Rip Kn is not a free agent. The real viceroy and ruler of India is not at Simla but at Rome, and the effective weapon used by the latter is the viceroy's confessor. Give, pray, my best wishes to your lady and the morsel. Be certain, that with a few undetectable mistakes and omissions notwithstanding, your esoteric Buddhism is the only right exposition, however incomplete, of our occult doctrines. You have made no cardinal, fundamental mistakes, and whatever may be given to you hereafter will not clash with a single sentence in your book, but on the contrary will explain away any seeming contradiction. How greatly mistaken was Mr. Hume's theory was shown by the Kila in the Theosophist. With all that, you may feel sure that neither M. nor I have contradicted each other in our respective statements. He was speaking of the inner eye of the outer round. There are many things that you have not learned but may some day, nor will you be able to ever compare. Hend the process of the obscurations until you have mastered the mathematical progress of the inner and the outer rounds and learned more about the specific difference between the seven. And thus, according to Mr. Massey's philosophical conclusion, we have no God. He is right, since he applies the name to an extra cosmic anomaly, and that we, knowing nothing of the latter, find each man his God within himself in his own personal, and at the same time, impersonal Avalokitesvara. And now farewell. And if it is so decreed that we should correspond no more, remember me with the same sincere good feeling as you will ever be remembered by, K. H. Letter No. Lskseeth received London, October 8, 1883, a temporary absence on imperative business, prevented for a few days my even knowing anything about your affairs, and it was not until today that I had the leisure to give them a thought. Upon reading your letter, the situation presented itself to me in such colors that I concluded to have you immediately given your freedom and so sent you a cable dispatch. This was with the object of removing from your mind any feeling of compulsion, moral or otherwise, and of leaving you to either take or reject the further proposals which may come to you from any part of India, at your option. If any consideration could have prompted a different course, it would have been entirely removed by the tone of your letter of August the I6th. The advocacy of the Bengal measure in the present aspect of affairs you think would ruin every prospect of the commercial success of the proposed journal. The Phoenix cannot possibly as now designed prove a commercial success. And a paper which is a commercial failure can have very little political weight. To persist then, would as you see it, be to lead a certain number of persons to fruitlessly waste a large sum of money. For the project thus crippled is pretty effectually stripped of its grand financial possibilities. Still, despite all this, you are disposed to go on if I wish it, cast the moral responsibility on me and swallow the somewhat repulsive pledge. My friend, you shall do nothing of the sort. The responsibility, notwithstanding all I could, and am willing to do, would fall upon you since you have been given plainly the option in my last letter to you. If henceforth, you have anything more to do with this unfortunate affair, it must be entirely upon your own judgment and responsibility. You have ill comprehended the law of karma, and my letter, if you could have imagined that I would dare to provoke its awful retaliation by forcing you or anyone to take up a line of action with such feelings in his heart. Knowing you, it was easy to foresee your, nay, the feelings of any honorable man having to face such a situation, repulsion for the work contemplated. Therefore, had I taken great care to impress upon you, in my letter that you were entirely and absolutely free in your choice. I blame myself for but one thing, viz., my having hinted at the probable consequence of your refusal, as implied in my pledge to the Kohan to thenceforward abstain from collaboration with Europeans until some future more favorable time. It was that which caused you to swallow the repulsive pledge more than anything said. This goes to my karma. But, this aside, by referring to my last letter, you will perceive that the necessity for independent, unbiased action on your part was strongly urged. I hoped even against the disheartening moral condition of my countrymen and forced myself almost to believe it possible to found a journal so obviously necessary at this great crisis, upon a basis thoroughly satisfactory to you and to all who might be concerned. I had forgotten that external appearance is everything in your world and that I was simply subjecting you to be regarded with contempt. But rest assured, had the money been collected as first attempted, and no pressure of working in a certain direction had been offered to you, and had you been left entirely your own master in the line of policy pursued, yet at this hour of bitter hatred, of mutual malice and contempt, the mere fact that you were advocating the cause of the despised, and now more than ever hated and crushed down nigger carrot would have stripped the Phoenix of even a shadow of any grand financial possibility. Still hardly a month ago I was so confident from seeing the still deep, strong feelings lurking in the national soul that I allowed you to grow equally and even more confident than myself. Others, whose intuition and foresight had not been blinded by their superiors, thought differently and some would have dissuaded me, yet, the aim being so worthy, and the possibility really existing, I was permitted to watch the project and use natural external means to aid its consummation. If indefinite waiting were practicable for you, the original scheme could be realized, but this is not so, and I must, therefore, withdraw the last appearance of constraint upon your free judgment, and thank you for having so loyally seconded the attempt to do good to India, even at the cost of your feelings and pecuniary interests. I should be most unwilling, apart from the rule of our order as regards karma, to draw you into a position where I could not recompense you in any way for loss of social prestige or financial disappointments. To do that is beyond my power. I could not look at you, if you were hourly feeling that you were regarded no better than a blackguard, and had no political weight with society at large on the score of character. If your lot was to be cast in with ours, such considerations would not weigh one moment. To all, whether Kohen or Kila, who are obligated workers among us, the first and last consideration is whether we can do good to our neighbor, no matter how humble he may be, and we do not permit ourselves to even think of the danger or any contumely, abuse or injustice visited upon ourselves. We are ready to be spat upon and crucified daily, not once, if real good to another can come of it. But the case is totally different with you. You have your path to tread in the more practical world, and your standing in it must not be jeopardized. Again, besides yourself, the contributors to capital must be justly dealt by. Among them are wealthy gemindars, but there are also poor patriots, who have made great exertions to subscribe their small sums from pure reverence to us and love of motherland. At least 50 such are waiting the latest turn of events, and husbanding their resources until the last moment before sending on their remittances to Calcutta. Devoted theosophists in various parts of India have been actually soliciting for subscriptions, on the theory of possible profit to capital set forth in M.R. Morgan's circular. The project has been warmly advocated by Alcott, Colonel Gordon, Narendra, and others known and unknown to you. A financial disaster to the phoenix of the nature you anticipate would compromise the personal influence of all. With such prospects, moreover, your late coadjutor M.R. Dare would not care to help you, even though M.R. Allen should permit him. And, finally, unless your personal faith in it were so blind as to swallow up your last instinct of prudence, you would not risk your own hard-earned capital in a foredoomed failure, and so could not in conscience allow anyone else to do it. Except you were allowed to cast the moral responsibility upon me, in short, to make me by miracle were that possible force a success. If that had been permitted, the journal would have been already founded, and its voice have made itself heard amid the harsh din of contemporary Indian affairs. I would have phrased my dispatch of today even stronger, but that I should, by telling you to abandon the affair, again assume the responsibility of blocking your free will. It is best that you should give the Bengal party the chance to state their conditions definitely and finally, and thereupon answer yes or no. To save your time and expense, I asked Alcott to write Narendra Babu to send him the landholders' proposals, that he may, upon the instant knowing your views and character, say whether they are fit to lay before you or not. And if not, that he will immediately communicate with your Calcutta solicitors, as you requested. This is the present situation of affairs, and very bad it is for India. It is premature as yet to tell you more of the secret influence that has brought it on, but you may hear of it later. Nor may I forecast the future, except so far as to draw more than ever your attention to the black clouds that are gathering over the political sky. You know I told you long ago to expect many and great disturbances of all kinds, as one cycle was closing and the other beginning its fateful activities. You already see in the seismological phenomena of late occurrence some of the proof. You will see a great many more, and shortly. And if we have to regret the blasting of a humanitarian project, it should at least mitigate the severity of your disappointment to feel that in a bad time like this one has to contend against seen and unseen influences of the most hostile nature. And now, a pleasanter word before concluding. Your decision to follow my lead into the Phoenix matter, even with the to you certainty of social degradation and pecuniary loss, had the reward of its karma already. So I conclude, at any rate, by the results. Though there was no test, so odious to you, meant, yet you were as good as tested and have not quailed. The fiat of contingent non-intercourse between us has been partially revoked. The prohibition with regard to other Europeans is as strict as ever, but in your case it is removed. And this consent, I know, has a direct bearing on your consent, the great sacrifice of your personal feeling in the present situation. This pelleing was found to have really redeeming qualities. But be warned, my friend, that this is not the last of your probations. It is not I who create them, but yourself by your struggle for light and truth against the world's dark influences. Be more careful as to what you say upon forbidden topics. The eighth sphere mystery is a very confidential subject, and you are far from understanding even its general aspect. You were repeatedly warned and should not have mentioned it. You have unintentionally brought ridicule upon a solemn matter. I have not to do with the replies to Mr. Myers, but, you may recognize in them, perhaps, the brusque influence of M.K. H. I am advised to request that, for the future, communications intended for me may be sent to either Damodar or Henry Alcott. Madame B's discretion is not improving in ratio with her physiological enfeeblement. Section V. The London Lodge of the Theosophical Society. Letter No. Lsxiv. Private. My dear friend, the enclosure is to be transmitted to the L.L.T.S, through you in your capacity of Vice President of the parent society and therefore representative of the President Founder, not as member of the branch at London. The recent occurrences in which you have borne a part not altogether pleasant, may be distressing to some and tiresome to others, yet it is better so than that the old paralytic calm should have continued. An outbreak of fever in the human body is nature's evidence that she is trying to expel the seeds of disease. And perhaps death anteriorly absorbed. As things were, the London branch was but vegetating and the vast possibilities of psychic evolution in Britain were completely untried. Karma evidently required that the repose should be broken by the agency of the one most responsible for it, C. Massey, and so it was he who brought Mrs. K to her present position. She has not accomplished her object, but karma has its own. Henceforth the London group, aroused, stimulated, and warned, have a clear field in which to exercise their activities. Your own karma, my friend, destines you to play a still more conspicuous part in European theosophical affairs than you have yet. Alcott's forthcoming visit will result in important developments, in whose outworking you are to have a hand. My desire is that you should be gathering together all the reserve forces of your being so that you may rise to the dignity and importance of the crisis. However little you may seem to achieve psychically in this birth, remember that your interior growth proceeds every instant, and that toward the end of your life as in your next birth your accumulated merit shall bring you all you aspire to. It is not politic that H.S. Alcott should be exclusively your guest during his whole stay in Britain. His time should be divided between yourself and others of various opinions should they wish to invite him for a short time. He will be accompanied by 397-7 Mohini, whom I have chosen as my Keela and with whom I sometimes communicate directly. Treat the boy kindly, forgetting he is a Bengali, and only remembering he is now my Keela. Do what you can to dignify Alcott's office, for he represents the entire society, and by reason of his official position, if for no other, stands with Upasika, closest to ourselves in the chain of theosophical work. Asir Vaklam. Kh. Letter No. LXXXV to any of the Vice Presidents or Councillors of the London Lodge, Theosophical Society, from Kh. To the members of the London Lodge, Theosophical Society, friends and opponents, I have just ordered 2 telegrams to be sent to Mrs. A. Kingsford and Mr. A. P. Sinnott to notify both that the former should continue to be the president of the London Lodge Theos Society. This is not the desire alone of either of us two, known to Mr. Sinnott, or of both, but the express wish of the Kohen himself. Mrs. Kingsford's election is not a matter of personal feeling between ourselves and that lady, but rests entirely on the advisability of having at the head of the society, in a place like London, a person well suited to the standard and aspirations of the, so far, ignorant, of esoteric truths, and therefore, malicious public. Nor is it a matter of the slightest consequence whether the gifted president of the London Lodge Theos SOC entertains feelings of reverence or disrespect toward the humble and unknown individuals at the head of the Tibetan good law, or the writer of the present, or any of his brothers, but rather a question whether the said lady is fitted for the purpose we have all at heart, namely the dissemination of truth through esoteric doctrines, conveyed by whatever religious channel, and the effacement of crass materialism and blind prejudice and scepticism. As the lady has rightly observed, the Western public should understand the Theosophical Society to be a philosophical school constitute on the ancient Hermetic basis, that public having never heard of the Tibetan, and entertaining very perverted notions of the esoteric Buddhist system. Therefore, and so far, we agree with the remarks embodied in the letter written by Mrs. K to Madam B, and which the latter was asked to submit to K.H. And, we would remind our members of the LL in this reference, that Hermetic philosophy is universal and unsectarian, while the Tibetan school will ever be regarded by those who know little, if anything of it, as colored more or less with sectarianism. The former, knowing neither caste, nor color, nor creed, no lover of esoteric wisdom can have any objection to the name, which otherwise he might feel were the society to which he belongs to be placarded with a specific denomination pertaining to a distinct religion. Hermetic philosophy suits every creed and philosophy and clashes with none. It is the boundless ocean of truth, the central point whitherhouse and wherein meet every river, as every stream, whether its source be in the east, west, north, or south. As the course of the river depends upon the nature of its basin, so the channel for communication of knowledge must conform itself to surrounding circumstances. The Egyptian hierophant, the Chaldean mage, the Arhat, and the Rishi, were bound in days of yore on the same voyage of discovery and ultimately arrived at the same goal, though by different tracks. There are even at the present moment 3 centers of the occult brotherhood in existence, widely separated geographically, and as widely exoterically, the true esoteric doctrine being identical in substance though differing in terms, all aiming at the same grand object, but no two agreeing seemingly in the details of procedure. It is an everyday occurrence to find students belonging to different schools of occult thought sitting side by side at the feet of the same guru. Upasika, Madam B, and Subaru, though pupils of the same master, have not followed the same philosophy. The one is Buddhist and the other an Advaiti. Many prefer to call themselves Buddhists not because the word attaches itself to the ecclesiastical system built upon the basic ideas of our Lord Gautama Buddha's philosophy, but because of the Sanskrit word buddhi, wisdom, enlightenment, and as a silent protest to the vain rituals and empty ceremonials, which have in too many cases been productive of the greatest calamities. Such also is the origin of the Chaldean term mage. Thus it is plain that the methods of occultism, though in the main unchangeable, has yet to conform to altered times and circumstances. The state of the general society of England quite different from that of India, where our existence is a matter of common and, so to say, of inherent belief among the population, and in a number of cases of positive knowledge requires quite a different policy in the presentation of occult sciences. The only object to be striven for is the amelioration of the condition of man by the spread of truth suited to the various stages of his development and that of the country he inhabits and belongs to. Truth has no earmark and does not suffer from the name under which it is promulgated if the said object is attained. The constitution of the Lodge, Theos Society, affords ground of a hope for the right method being put in operation before long. It is well known that a magnet would cease to be a magnet if its poles cease to be antagonistic. Heat on one side should be met by frost on the other, and the resulting temperature will be healthy to all people. Mrs. Kingsford and Mr. Sinnott are both useful, both needed and appreciated by our revered Kohen and Master, just because they are the 2 poles calculated to keep the whole body in magnetic harmony, as the judicious disposal of both will make an excellent middle ground to be attained by no other means, one correcting and equilibrizing the other. The direction and good services of both is necessary for the steady progress of the Theosophical Society in England. But both cannot be presidents. Mrs. Kingsford's views being at the bottom, minus the details, identical with those of Mr. Synod in matters of occult philosophy and, by reason of their association with the names and symbols familiar to Christian ears and eyes, they falling in better than those of Mr. Synod with the actual bent of English national intelligence and spirit of conservatism. Mrs. K. is thus more adapted to lead the movement successfully in England. Therefore, if our advice and desire are of any account with the members of the London Lodge, she will have to occupy the presidential chair for the ensuing year, at any rate. Let the members under her leadership resolutely try to live down the unpopularity which all esoteric teaching and all reform are sure to attract at the outset, and they will succeed. The Society will be a great help to, and a great power in, the world, as well as a secure channel for the flow of its president's philanthropy. Her constant and not altogether unsuccessful strife in the cause of anti-vivisection and her staunch advocacy of vegetarianism are alone sufficient to entitle her to the consideration of our Kohans as of all true Buddhists and Advaitis, hence our Mahakohan's preference in this direction. But, as the services of Mr. Synod in the good cause are great, indeed far greater, so far, than of any Western theosophist, therefore, a new arrangement is found advisable. It seems necessary for a proper study and correct understanding of our philosophy and the benefit of those whose inclination leads them to seek esoteric knowledge from the northern Buddhist source, and in order that such teaching should not be even virtually imposed or offered to those theosophists who may differ from our views, that an exclusive group composed of those members who desire to follow absolutely the teachings of the school to which we, of the Tibetan Brotherhood, belong, should be formed under Mr. Synod's direction and within the London Lodge Ts. Such is, in fact, the desire of the Mahakohan. Our last year's experience amply shows the danger of so recklessly submitting our sacred doctrines to the unprepared world. We expect, therefore, and are resolved to urge, if necessary, more caution than ever from our followers in the exposition of our secret teachings. Consequently, many of the latter which Mr. Synod and his fellow students may from time to time receive from us, will have to be kept entirely secret from the world if they would have us give them our help in that direction. I need hardly point out how the proposed arrangement is calculated to lead to a harmonious progress of the LL.Ts. It is a universally admitted fact that the marvelous success of the Theosophical Society in India is due entirely to its principle of wise and respectful toleration of each other's opinions and beliefs. Not even the President Founder has the right directly or indirectly to interfere with the freedom of thought of the humblest member, least of all to seek to influence his personal opinion. It is only in the absence of this generous consideration, that even the faintest shadow of difference arms seekers after the same truth, otherwise earnest and sincere, with the scorpion whip of hatred against their brothers, equally sincere and earnest. Deluded victims of distorted truth, they forget, or never knew, that discord is the harmony of the universe. Thus in the Theos Society, each part, as in the glorious fugues of the immortal Mozart, ceaselessly chases the other in harmonious discord on the path's carrot of eternal progress to meet and finally blend at the threshold of the pursued goal in one harmonious whole, the keynote in nature. Absolute justice makes no difference between the many and the few. Therefore, while thanking the majority of the LL. Theosophists for their loyalty to us, their invisible teachers, we must at the same time, remind them that their president, Mrs. Kingsford, is loyal and true also carried to that which she believes to be the truth. And, as she is thus loyal and true to her convictions, however small the minority that may side with her at present, the majority led by Mr. Synod, our representative in London, cannot with justice charge her with the guilt, which, since she has emphatically disclaimed all intention of breaking the letter or the spirit of Article 6 of the Rules of the Parent Theos Society, which please see and read, is one only in the eyes of those who would be rather too severe. Every Western theosophist should learn and remember, especially those of them who would be our followers, that in our brotherhood, all personalities sink into one idea, abstract right and absolute truth. to call justice for all. And that, though we may not say with the Christians, return good for evil, we repeat with Confucius * return good for good, for evil justice / thus, the theosophists of MRS. K's way of thinking, were they even to oppose some of us personally to the bitter end, are entitled to as much respect and consideration, so long as they are sincere, from us and their fellow members of opposite views, as those who are ready with Mr. Sinnet to follow absolutely but our special teaching. A dutiful regard for these rules in life will always promote the best interests of all concerned. It is necessary for the parallel progress of the groups under MRS. K and MR. S that neither should interfere with the beliefs and rights of the other. And it is seriously expected that both of them will be actuated by an earnest and sleepless desire to respect the philosophical independence of each other, while preserving at the same time their unity as a whole, namely the objects of the parent theos society in their integrity and those of the London Lodge, in their slight modification. We wish the London Society should preserve its harmony in division like the Indian branches, where the representatives of all the different schools of Hinduism seek to study esoteric sciences and the wisdom of old, without necessarily giving up for it their respective beliefs. Each branch, often members of the same branch, Christian converts included, in some cases study esoteric philosophy each in his own way, yet always knitting together brotherly hands for the furtherance of the common objects of the society. To carry out this program, it is desirable that the * London Lodge should be administered by, at least, 14 councillors, one half openly inclining towards the Christian esotericism as represented by MRS. K, and the other half following Buddhist esotericism as represented by MR.S., all important business to be transacted by majority of votes. We are well aware of and quite alive to the difficulties of such an arrangement. Yet, it seems absolutely necessary in order to re-establish the lost harmony. The constitution of the London Lodge has to be amended, and can be so amended if the MEM bears would but try, and so bring about more strength in such friendly division than enforced unity. Unless, therefore, both MRS. Kingsford and Mr. Sinnet agree to disagree in details and work in strict unison for the chief objects as laid down in the rules of the parent society, we can have no hand in the future development and progress of the London Lodge. KH December 7, 1883, Mysore. Letter No. Lsksi received January, 1884. GCXXJ friend, I take you at your word. In one of your recent letters to the OL you express your readiness to follow my advice in almost anything I may ask you. Well, the time has come to prove your willingness. And since, in this particular case, I myself am simply carrying out the wishes of my Kohan, I hope you will not experience too much difficulty in sharing my fate by doing as I do. Fascinating MRS. K has to remain President jusque nouvel ordre. Nor can I conscientiously, after reading her apologetic letter to HPB, say that I do not side with her in much she has to say in her excuse. Of course much of it is afterthought, still her very eagerness to retain her post contains good hope for the future of the London Lodge, especially if you help me by carrying out the spirit of my instructions. Thus the London Theos SOC will be no more a tail for her to wag at her own sweet pleasure and fancy, but she will become herself part and parcel of that tail, and, the more she helps to wag it the better such activity for your society. Minute explanations would be rather too long and tedious a job. Suffice that you should know that her anti-vivisection struggle and her strict vegetarian diet have won entirely over to her side our stern master. He cares less than we do for any outward or even inward expression or feeling of disrespect to the Mahatmas. Let her do her duty by the society, be true to her principles, and all the rest will come in good time. She is very young, and her personal vanity and other womanly shortcomings are to be laid at the door of Mr. Maitland and the Greek chorus of her admirers. The enclosed paper is to be delivered by you sealed to one of the counselors or vice presidents of your society. Mr. CC. Massey, I believe, would be the best fitted person for the task, as he is the sincere friend of both parties concerned. The choice is left to your own discretion and judgment, however. All that you are asked to insist upon is that it should be read before a general meeting composed of as many theosophists as you can gather, and at the earliest opportunity. It contains and carries within its folds, and characters a certain occult influence that ought to reach as many theosophists as possible. What it is you may, perhaps, gather hereafter from its direct and indirect effects. Meanwhile read and seal it, and allow no one to put the indiscreet question whether you have taken note of its contents, for you will have to keep the knowledge secret. In case the condition should appear to you dangerous, as it might necessitate a denial of fact, better leave it alone and unread. Fear not, I am there to watch over your interests. At all events the program is as follows. The memo written by your humble correspondent must be theosophists assembled in solemn meeting and preserved in the Society's records. It contained of our views in regard to the questions raised concerning its management and basis of work. Our sympathy with it will depend upon the carrying out of the program therein contained and laid down after mature thought.